What if the reason your brilliant product just isn't selling has like absolutely nothing to do with your product and literally everything to do with the mental box you've accidentally trapped it in?
Man, that is uh, a really terrifying proposition for any creator or founder to grapple with.
It really is.
Because you spend months, maybe years, right, pouring your soul, your capital, your team's entire energy into building something that is objectively great.
Right. On paper, it's perfect.
Exactly. But if that mental box, the context surrounding the product, if that is wrong, the product itself becomes practically invisible.
I mean, you can have the absolute best engineering in the world. You can have the coolest, most cutting-edge features that completely outpace every competitor.
Yeah.
You can even have the highest marketing budget in your entire industry,
Yeah.
hiring the most prestigious agencies. But if you fail at this one hidden foundation, the entire business just slowly suffocates.
It's the silent killer.
The tension there is just palpable. You look at your metrics, you look at the product, and you're doing everything right. But the market is just staring back at you with this blank, uninterested expression.
Well, it acts as the silent killer of innovation because the failure doesn't look like a foundational crack, at least not to the untrained eye.
What does it look like then?
It masquerades as a bunch of other issues. So it looks like a marketing problem. Our ads aren't converting,
Right.
or it looks like a sales problem, like our reps just aren't closing, or even a product market fit problem where leadership says, oh, we just need to build more features.
So they're just treating the symptoms.
Exactly. So leadership spends all their time trying to fix the windows, painting the walls, maybe swapping out the front door.
Well, the actual foundation of the house is quietly sinking into the mud.
Yes, exactly. Sinking right into the mud.
And that invisible foundation is exactly what we're tackling today. We're pulling apart the core concepts from the introduction of April Dunford's book, obviously awesome, to figure out why so many incredible products just die in plain sight.
It's such a crucial topic.
It really is. So for you listening, we are going to explore what positioning actually is, why it is the absolute prerequisite for every single marketing or sales tactic you employ, and how to spot the hidden cascading symptoms of weak positioning that might be quietly destroying your own business right now.
It's a lifesaver for anyone building anything.
Totally. For anyone listening who is building something, selling something, or just interested in the raw mechanics of business, this deep dive is your shortcut to making your product's value completely, undeniably obvious.
The business landscape today is incredibly susceptible to shiny object syndrome.
Oh, for sure.
We are collectively just obsessed with trendy tactics. Every single week there is a new hack, a new distribution channel, right?
A revolutionary new AI software tool that promises to just magically automate all your growth.
Right. But we are stepping away from the shiny objects today. We're looking at the bedrock strategy that makes those tactics actually function in the real world. We have to look at the underlying psychology and really the physics of how a product actually connects with the human brain before a single dollar is ever spent on promotion.
So we need to start by defining our terms, because the author makes a super compelling point right out of the gate. She says everyone in business thinks they know what positioning is, but very few people actually know how to do it.
That is so true.
She defines positioning as the act of deliberately defining how you are the best at something that a defined market cares a lot about.
Let's really dissect the wording of that definition, because what's fascinating here is that every single word carries weight. The act of deliberately defining.
Deliberately.
Right. That implies agency. It implies a conscious strategic choice. What often happens is that this specific deliberate act is just entirely bypassed.
People just skip it.
They completely skip it. Founders and executives confuse positioning with messaging. They just lump it in with marketing in general.
Oh, I've seen that. A team will sit down, write some clever copy for the website homepage, design a really nice logo, and then just conclude, well, we've positioned the product.
But messaging is merely the output. Positioning is the input.
It's like the architectural blueprint versus the actual paint on the walls. You can't paint a wall that hasn't been structurally framed yet.
And if you look at the behavior of modern companies, they are essentially trying to paint empty air. They are throwing massive budgets at highly sophisticated tactics. Let's take account-based marketing, or ABM, for example.
Yeah.
It's a very popular, highly effective B2B strategy.
Just for you listening who might not be deep in the B2B marketing weeds, account-based marketing is essentially treating an individual prospective company as its own distinct market.
Right.
Instead of casting a wide net to catch anyone, you use a sniper rifle to target, say, the executive team at Microsoft with highly, highly personalized campaigns.
Thank you for the context. Yeah. So ABM is an incredibly expensive, resource-heavy tactic. It requires customized content, specialized ad targeting, deep coordination between sales and marketing.
This is a huge lift.
It is. Now think about the dependency there. If you want to execute account-based marketing, what is the absolute prerequisite? You have to know, with surgical precision, what a target account actually looks like.
You need to know exactly who you are for.
Exactly. If your positioning is weak or broad, you end up aiming that really expensive sniper rifle at the exact wrong companies.
The exact same logic applies to like growth hacking or relying on viral content algorithms or even deploying complex AI sales chatbots.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're trying to growth hack user acquisition, you fundamentally must know who you are trying to acquire and what specific unique value proposition will actually hook their psychology.
Yes.
If you skip the positioning step, the marketing mechanism just fails because marketing is just an amplifier.
It's a megaphone.
It's a megaphone.
It amplifies whatever you feed into it. If you feed confusion into a megaphone, you just get louder confusion.
That's a great way to put it. The author actually uses an analogy here that I think captures the sheer frustration of this dynamic. She says, trying to market a poorly positioned product is like speaking Japanese slowly and loudly to someone who only speaks English.
Oh, I love that. The human element of that analogy is what makes it resonate so well. Because the volume isn't the problem,
No.
and the speed of delivery isn't the problem. It is a fundamental mismatch of context and comprehension.
Right.
A company can buy a billboard in Times Square. They can buy a Super Bowl ad. They can yell as loud as their venture capital funding allows.
But if the prospect lacks the mental framework to understand what the product actually is, the message simply bounces off their cognitive shield.
It just doesn't register.
And then she hits us with an even more visceral analogy. I love this one. She compares poor positioning to trying to make an omelet with rotten eggs.
Ooh.
Your cooking technique, which in this metaphor represents your marketing and sales tactics, might be absolutely flawless.
Right. You're a master chef.
Exactly. You might possess Michelin star-level whisking abilities, perfect pan temperature control, exquisite plating skills. But nobody wants to eat what you are serving because the core ingredient is fundamentally, incurably flawed.
That rotten egg dynamic is exactly what triggers the toxic interdepartmental warfare we see in so many struggling companies.
Oh, the blame game.
Yes. When the omelet tastes terrible and revenue drops, what happens?
The marketing team immediately blames the sales team.
Exactly. Marketing says, we gave you the leads, you just didn't close them.
And then the sales team turns right around and blames marketing for a terrible recipe. These leads are garbage. They don't actually want what we're selling.
Right. And then the product team is just sitting in the corner saying, hey, we delivered the eggs exactly to the technical specifications you asked for.
Everyone is doing their specific job correctly, but the underlying context, the positioning, was rotten from the start. Okay, I need to play the role of the stubborn visionary founder here for a second because I think a lot of people listening might have a lingering objection.
Okay, let's hear it.
We see companies absolutely explode out of nowhere, seemingly overnight. What about the unicorns? Aren't things like viral content or aggressive growth hacking literally designed to overcome slow sales?
Wow.
Like, if I build an undeniably amazing product and I secure a massive, well-funded ad budget, can't I essentially brute force my way into success? If you throw enough money at a wall, eventually, by the law of large numbers, doesn't something have to stick?
Okay, that is the exact hubris that leads heavily funded startups into spectacular public failures.
Really?
Yes. Let's peel back the layers on that assumption. Let's look at a historical example of brute force marketing. Do you remember Quibi?
Oh, wow. Yeah, the short-form streaming service from a few years ago?
Yeah.
Jeffrey Katzenberg and Meg Whitman. I think they raised something like nearly $2 billion before they even launched.
Almost $2 billion. They had the absolute best Hollywood talent, incredible production values, and a marketing budget that most companies couldn't even dream of.
I remember seeing them everywhere.
They bought Super Bowl ads. They were literally everywhere. They tried to brute force their way into the cultural zeitgeist, but their positioning was entirely muddled.
It was so confusing.
Right. Was it a premium television network? Was it a mobile app competing with YouTube and TikTok? They tried to charge a premium subscription fee for short-form, mobile-only content at a time when people were, locked in their homes watching massive flat-screen
The
TVs.
market looked at it and couldn't figure out where it fit into their lives.
Exactly.
They already had Netflix for premium shows, and they had TikTok for short mobile entertainment. Quibi created a massive amount of noise, but literally no cognitive home for the consumer.
And that is the true danger of scaling without positioning. Amplifying a confusing message just creates more confusion, but at a dramatically higher financial cost.
It just accelerates the burn rate.
Exactly. And let's say you bypass the venture capital route and you just get lucky with a viral hit on TikTok. Millions of people see your product video.
Right, the dream scenario.
But is it? Because if your positioning is weak, millions of people will look at it, their brains will fail to categorize what it actually is or why they specifically need it, and they will swipe right past it within 3 seconds.
Wow.
You've just captured lightning in a bottle with virality, only to generate a massive historic amount of bounces and zero revenue.
You essentially teach millions of people the exact wrong thing about your brand all at once. You burn your first impression on a global scale.
You scale the rejection. Growth hacking a poorly positioned product is the equivalent of putting a massive turbocharger on a car that is facing a brick wall.
Oh, that's a brutal image.
You aren't going to win a race, you're just going to total the vehicle a whole lot faster.
Okay, let's unpack this. I'll drop the stubborn founder act because that Quibi example is super sobering. Even billions of dollars can't override basic human psychology.
No, they really can't.
So, if bad positioning is driving a turbocharged car into a wall, what does good positioning actually feel like in practice? Because Dunford makes it sound almost magical. There's this brilliant quote she uses from Warren Buffett. How do you beat Bobby Fischer? You play him at any game but chess.
That quote perfectly encapsulates the paradigm shift required here.
It's so good.
Because the true underlying goal of positioning is not about competing head-to-head in a market where the rules are already stacked against you.
Right.
Think about Bobby Fischer. He was an absolute grandmaster, a literal chess prodigy. If you sit down across from him at a chessboard, you are going to lose.
Every time.
It doesn't matter how hard you practice or how much you believe in yourself. The rules of that specific game heavily, disproportionately favor his specific set of skills.
The arena itself dictates the winner before the game even begins, so you simply refuse to play him at chess.
You change the context, you shift the frame of reference entirely, you walk up to Bobby Fischer and say, "Hey Bobby, let's play tennis."
I love that.
Suddenly, his absolute intellectual dominance in chess is rendered completely irrelevant. Good positioning is the strategic, deliberate act of changing the context so that you are playing a game where your specific strengths guarantee a win. It's about defining your own arena.
It's like challenging Michael Phelps to a high-stakes competition. But instead of getting into the pool for the 100-meter butterfly, you challenge him to a game of Scrabble.
Yes, exactly.
You win because you deliberately chose the arena where your specific vocabulary skills matter infinitely more than his wingspan, his lung capacity, or his hydrodynamic profile.
Right.
You didn't train to become a faster swimmer than Michael Phelps. You just realized that getting in the pool was a choice, and you deliberately chose not to.
And that is the exact cognitive leap that the vast majority of businesses fail to make.
Why do you think that is?
Well, they see the Michael Phelps of their industry, a massive, established, deeply entrenched market leader like a Salesforce or an Apple, and they think, we just need to train harder. We need to swim faster. We need to add a feature they don't have. We need to lower our price by 10%.
And they jump into the deep end of the pool.
And they get absolutely crushed by the wake. Strong positioning, as the author explicitly states, feels like cheating.
It does sound like cheating.
It allows a business to draft along with the macroeconomic forces of the market, putting the wind at your back instead of constantly fighting a gale force headwind.
You stop trying to win the category where your competitors possess the ultimate, unassailable advantage. You deliberately define a new arena where your unique, specific attributes are exactly what the judge is looking for.
But to execute that maneuver, you have to first realize that you actually possess the power to choose the game. You are not assigned a category by some divine market force. And that brings us to the historical context of why this is so difficult for modern companies. We haven't really been taught that we have that power. The curriculum is broken.
If choosing your own arena is the equivalent of a strategic cheat code, The obvious mystery is why every CEO and founder on Earth isn't already doing it.
Exactly.
Why is it the exception rather than the rule? Why are so many brilliant, highly educated people still trying to outswim Michael Phelps? To figure that out, we have to look at how business strategy has been taught, and we have to travel back in time to 1981.
1981 was an entirely different universe in terms of commerce, media, and human attention spans.
It really was. In 1981, Al Ries and Jack Trout published this seminal industry-defining book called Positioning, The Battle for Your Mind.
It's a classic.
This is the text that practically invented the term and put the word positioning on the map in the corporate world. It is a legendary book.
It is legendary, and rightly so. But we have to vividly visualize what the consumer market looked like in 1981 compared to the hyper-fragmented digital reality of today.
Night and day.
Dunford points this out beautifully. In the early 80s, you had 3 major television networks.
Right.
You were maybe listening to a Blondie cassette on a brand new Sony Walkman. You were dropping quarters into a Pac-Man machine. The options available to a consumer were incredibly constrained.
Very limited.
Fast forward to today, if you just open the App Store on your smartphone, you have over 2 million different software choices staring you in the face.
It's overwhelming.
If you open a browser and go to Amazon, you have a marketplace containing roughly 580 million individual products.
The sheer volume of noise, the cognitive overload facing a modern buyer is exponentially larger. It's not even a comparison. It's a completely different species of market.
Ries and Trout were absolute visionaries for their time. Even in the comparatively quiet landscape of 1981, they correctly identified that buyers were becoming overwhelmed by copycat products.
They saw it coming.
They foresaw the noise. They realized that companies needed to carve out a highly specific, unique space in the mind of the consumer to survive. But, and this is the massive, critical gap that has haunted the business world for 4 decades, they left out the instruction manual. They masterfully explained what positioning was and why it was important, but they never really explained how to actually do it.
They pointed a spotlight at the destination, they proved it was a beautiful place to be, but they didn't provide a map to get there.
And if you look at the evidence they used, their book relied heavily on case studies of massive, big-budget television advertising campaigns.
Right, because they were ad guys.
Exactly. They were ad agency guys.
Yeah.
They used examples from campaigns their own agency had worked on for massive conglomerates. This created a lasting, damaging legacy.
Oh, so?
It left generations of business leaders with the false impression that positioning was this mystical, highly creative, Mad Men-style endeavor.
Like Don Draper staring out a window.
Yes. It taught people that positioning is something you hire a prestigious agency to conjure up for you over 3 martini lunches, and you execute it by simply purchasing millions of dollars in national TV airtime.
So because of this massive instructional gap, generations of founders, product creators, and marketers were essentially left to just muck around in the dark and guess.
Mucking around is exactly what it was.
Dunford herself admits to falling into this trap early in her career. She notes that she repositioned 16 different products over 2 decades as an executive, and she learned the hard way.
Through trial and error.
She admits to making literally every mistake possible before she finally developed a bulletproof, field-tested methodology that actually worked.
Well, the mucking around was inevitable because there was no methodology. People were just throwing concepts at the wall to see what would stick.
Right.
A company would launch a product with a vague idea of what it was, wait to see what the early adopters called it, and then try to retroactively build a brand around that label.
That sounds so stressful.
It was reactive, not proactive, and it often yielded disastrous financial results.
I want to push on this idea of an instructional gap because marketing is a massive, highly funded academic discipline.
It is.
Universities all over the world grant specialized degrees in this stuff. If business schools teach positioning, and they absolutely do, it's in every marketing 101 syllabus, what have they been teaching for the last 40 years, if not the how?
This raises an important question, right? Because the academic approach to positioning is fundamentally disconnected from the entrepreneurial reality of actually building a company.
Okay.
Academia teaches the theory of positioning within a sterilized environment. If you take a strategy class, they will give you a classic Harvard Business Review case study. They will have you analyze the market dynamics between Coca-Cola and Pepsi.
Right. A scenario where the variables are completely known, the market has been established for a century, and the core product sugar water hasn't meaningfully changed in our lifetimes.
It is clean, it is static, and it is easy to chart on a whiteboard. But practically applying positioning to a chaotic, underfunded, ever-changing tech startup, or trying to position a new software product where the features are evolving every 2 weeks based on real-time user feedback.
That's a whole different ballgame.
It requires a completely different, highly adaptable skill set. In the real world, the product you initially set out to build almost always morphs into something entirely different by the time it actually hits the market.
Absolutely.
Academia does not teach you how to reposition a generic database into a specialized business intelligence tool on the fly while you are desperately trying to make payroll on a Friday afternoon.
They just teach you how to write a positioning statement.
Yes, the dreaded positioning statement.
I remember those.
It's a fill-in-the-blank template that was popularized in the 90s. Dunford actively despises the traditional positioning statement, and for very good reason.
How does it usually go?
The template basically says, for target customer who has need, our product is a category that provides benefit.
I mean, it sounds perfectly reasonable on the surface.
It sounds reasonable until you realize that filling in those blanks assumes you already possess all the correct answers.
Oh.
It assumes you already know, with absolute certainty, exactly who your best customer is and exactly what category you should be competing in.
Which is exactly what you're trying to figure out.
Exactly. It's an exercise in writing down assumptions, not a methodology for discovering the truth. It provides the illusion of strategy without any of the heavy lifting.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because of this historical lack of practical step-by-step education, most businesses operating today are unknowingly suffering from what Dunford categorizes as weak positioning.
Yes.
And the tragedy is that they don't even realize it's a positioning problem. They completely misdiagnose themselves. But this disease leaves a very specific trail of evidence.
It absolutely does.
If you know what to look for, there are hidden cascading symptoms that prove a business is suffering from this exact foundational rot. Instead of just listing them out, let's explore how these symptoms actually manifest in the real world. Let's imagine a hypothetical B2B software company, we'll call them TechFlow, and watch how a lack of positioning systematically tears them apart.
I like that approach. It really grounds the theory. The breakdown usually starts at the very top of the funnel, with what we can call the explain versus close trap. This is the first glaring symptom.
Okay, let's look at TechFlow. Their current legacy customers absolutely love their software. They use it every day.
Okay.
But when TechFlow's marketing team generates a new lead and the sales rep gets that prospect on a Zoom call, the prospect is totally baffled.
Right.
The sales rep is spending 45 minutes of a 60-minute call just trying to explain what TechFlow actually is, rather than discussing the prospect's pain points or trying to close the deal.
To understand why this happens, we have to look at the neuroscience of human cognition, specifically heuristics and cognitive load.
Okay, lay it on me.
The human brain is an incredibly energy-hungry organ. To conserve glucose, it relies on shortcuts or heuristics to process new information.
Right.
When a prospect encounters a new product like TechFlow, their brain instantly, subconsciously searches for context clues to categorize it. It wants to put it in a familiar mental box.
It's like walking into a massive grocery store. If you see a new product placed in the dairy aisle next to the milk, your brain immediately assumes it needs to be refrigerated and it probably spoils quickly.
Yes.
If that exact same product is placed in the cleaning supplies aisle, your brain assumes it's toxic and you should use it to scrub your floors. The context dictates the perception before you even read the label.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. Now, if TechFlow's positioning is weak, if they haven't deliberately placed themselves in the correct aisle of the software market, the prospect's brain cannot quickly categorize them.
Because they're just floating in the middle of the store.
Exactly. And the brain hates ambiguity. So if you don't provide the context, the prospect will simply invent a position for you based on whatever random clues they can grasp.
Well, that sounds dangerous.
It is. And trust me, the position a confused customer invents is rarely the one that highlights your product's best features. They will usually shove you into an existing mental box with a bunch of tools you don't actually compete with, completely obscuring your unique value.
Okay, but I can hear the scrappy startup founders listening to this and saying, hold on, is that really a problem? Isn't any customer a good customer? Does it really matter if a prospect invents a slightly inaccurate position for my product in their own head, as long as they eventually hand over their credit card and sign the contract?
It is a massive existential problem.
Man.
When you abdicate the responsibility of positioning to the prospect, you are choosing to operate at a severe competitive disadvantage.
How so?
Let's go back to the grocery store. If you have invented an incredible, revolutionary new health drink, but the customer's brain categorizes you as just another generic soda, they are going to expect you to be priced at 99 cents,
Right.
and they're going to expect you to taste like artificial syrup.
Right.
When you inevitably don't meet those incorrect expectations, friction explodes.
The sales rep at TechFlow is spending all their precious limited time trying to untangle the prospect's misconceptions.
Yes, exactly.
They are constantly playing defense.
Yeah.
They're saying, no, we aren't a project management tool. We're a workflow automation platform. They are arguing about what they are instead of explaining why the prospect should buy.
They're desperately trying to convince the prospect they are a Scrabble player, while the prospect keeps aggressively insisting they're a swimmer.
Wow, yeah.
And this exhausting dynamic triggers a chain reaction that leads directly to the second symptom. Because the prospect is confused, the evaluation process drags on forever. Welcome to the sales cycle slog.
The sales cycle slog. This is the agonizing pain of incredibly long sales cycles, dismal close rates, and the heartbreak of constantly losing deals to the competition at the last possible minute.
It's soul-crushing for a sales team.
TechFlow does a great demo, the prospect nods and seems interested, the sales rep follows up diligently for 6 months, and then absolute silence.
Ghosted.
Or worse, the prospect emails back and says, we decided to go with Salesforce, it just felt safer.
A prolonged sales cycle, assuming the product actually works, is almost always a symptom of a context problem. Without clear, tight positioning, your marketing casts way too wide a net. Because TechFlow sounds a little bit like everything, it attracts everyone.
Right.
But everyone doesn't actually need what TechFlow does best.
You end up with a pipeline full of prospects who are fundamentally a poor fit for the product.
Exactly. And poor fit prospects don't just say no quickly, they linger.
They just hang around.
They drag out the evaluation process because they are trying to figure out if this confusing tool can somehow be wedge-fitted to solve their specific problem.
Which it can't.
Right. They ask a million highly specific technical questions because the product wasn't built for their exact use case. They demand custom feature development before they will sign.
And then what happens?
At the very end of this exhausting 6-month marathon, when it's time to actually authorize the budget, they get cold feet, the confusion breeds risk aversion, and they drop out or they default to the giant, safe, established competitor.
Because TechFlow never made their unique value completely undeniably obvious. They were just one of many confusing options in a crowded spreadsheet.
Right.
This brings up a really counterintuitive point, though. Strong positioning repels the wrong customers just as effectively as it attracts the right ones.
Yes.
If you are suffering from a sales cycle slog, it's because your positioning hasn't given those poor fit prospects the necessary context to disqualify themselves early and get out of your sales rep's pipeline.
And let's look at the worst case scenario. What happens if the TechFlow sales rep, through sheer force of will and exhaustion, actually manages to close one of those highly confused, poor fit prospects?
Oh boy.
That leads us directly to the third most destructive symptom, the subscription killer.
High churn.
High churn.
This is the scenario where a customer goes through that agonizing 6-month sales cycle, finally buys the product, logs in, and then almost immediately abandons it.
Yeah.
They cancel their annual subscription in month 2, they demand a refund, they write angry emails to the CEO.
It feels like an ultimate betrayal to the product engineering team. They think we built exactly what we promised, but it is an entirely predictable outcome when the positioning is broken. The customer bought an illusion created by their own miscategorization.
It's like a customer walking into a high-end, extremely authentic, world-renowned sushi restaurant. They sit down, they look at the menu, and they suddenly become furiously angry that the restaurant doesn't serve bacon cheeseburgers.
Exactly.
They storm out, they go on to Yelp, and they write a scathing 1-star review that says, terrible restaurant, completely useless, 0 cheeseburgers.
That analogy perfectly isolates the problem, because the customer isn't inherently wrong or stupid for wanting a cheeseburger.
No.
And the chef isn't wrong for serving world-class Michelin-quality sushi. The failure occurred at the sign on the front door.
The context.
Right, the positioning brought the wrong expectation into the building. But what is truly fascinating and terrifying is the collateral damage this causes inside a software company like TechFlow. It goes so much deeper than just the lost revenue of one canceled subscription.
Right. What actually happens internally when these cheeseburger customers start complaining?
Well, these confused customers do not leave quietly. They open dozens of support tickets. They flood the customer success managers with complaints. They basically demand that the sushi restaurants start grilling beef.
And if the company is desperate for revenue.
Exactly. If TechFlow's leadership isn't incredibly disciplined, the product management team starts listening to them. The product team looks at the churn metrics, panics, and starts adjusting the product roadmap to build features that make absolutely no sense for the core product.
Wow. Wait, really? They trick themselves into trying to appease a vocal minority of people who are fundamentally the wrong fit and are probably going to cancel their subscription anyway.
Yes, you end up ruining the exquisite sushi to try and slap together a highly mediocre cheeseburger.
That's tragic.
You dilute the core value of the product, you frustrate your best, most loyal customers who actually came for the sushi, and you waste millions in engineering resources trying to save a customer who never should have been allowed in the building in the first place.
That is the toxic cascade of weak positioning,
It is.
which leads us to the final resting place of a poorly positioned company. Symptom 4, the price pressure cooker.
Ouch.
Yeah. This is the state where TechFlow sales reps are constantly complaining to management that their prices are too high. Every single deal requires a massive discount to close. The perceived value of the product has hit rock bottom.
The price pressure cooker is the natural, inevitable conclusion of the first three symptoms. If your product seems exactly like everything else in the market, if the confused prospect has shoved you into a mental box alongside 10 other generic competitors because your positioning is weak, then your product is no longer a unique solution.
What is it?
It has become a commodity. And human beings are economically conditioned to buy commodities based on one primary metric:
Price.
price.
If a barrel of oil is exactly the same as any other barrel of oil, you don't care about the brand. You just buy the cheapest one.
But clear, deliberate positioning breaks that commodity trap entirely. It reframes the conversation.
Right.
It proves that you are not a generic commodity. It proves that you are a highly specialized leader offering unique, indispensable value to a specific type of customer.
That makes total sense.
If you are the only company on earth that makes a software tool specifically designed to solve the exact excruciating workflow problem that my law firm is facing, I am not going to haggle with you over $50 a month.
You just pay it.
I am going to pay a premium, gladly, because the context you've built justifies the price. Weak positioning invites endless price pressure and discounting. Strong positioning justifies a premium.
So we've charted the complete pathology of this disease. We've watched a company go from baffling its prospects to enduring endless sales cycles, to watching angry customers churn and demand irrelevant features, to finally bleeding out in a commodity price war.
It's a dark path.
It really is.
Yeah.
Having identified the symptoms and the sheer destruction they cause, we have to ask the most important question. Who inside the business holds the cure? Who needs to step up and take ownership of fixing the foundation?
This is a crucial pivot in our understanding of the topic, because the framework Dunford lays out isn't just a playbook for the marketing department. In fact, if repositioning is left solely to the marketing team, it almost always fails.
Really? Why is that?
Because marketing cannot change the product roadmap. Marketing cannot change the sales compensation structure. This framework requires executive power.
Is this a leadership issue?
It is for founders, CEOs, senior marketers, heads of sales, and executives at mature businesses whose growth has suddenly flatlined. Even solo entrepreneurs and online creators. The cure requires cross-functional leadership.
And the cure involves making choices. Hard choices. Which is inherently scary. Dunford quotes Michael Porter, the legendary Harvard Business School strategist, who said, "Strategy is about making choices, trade-offs. It's about deliberately choosing to be different."
That single word, trade-offs, is the concept that paralyzes intelligent people.
Totally.
It is terrifying to make a definitive choice. It is terrifying to look at a massive, broad, lucrative market and boldly declare, no, we are not for everyone. We are explicitly ignoring 80% of this market to focus solely on this specific 20%.
It goes against our instincts.
Human nature, driven by fear and a desire for safety, makes us want to keep all our options open. We want to be the software tool for the massive enterprise and the scrappy small business and the solo freelancer.
We want to be the incredible sushi restaurant that also sells cheeseburgers and pizza and tacos, just in case someone walks in wanting one.
Yes, because if you narrow your focus, the immediate psychological reaction is that you feel like you are leaving money on the table. You feel like you are shrinking your total addressable market.
But it's an illusion.
It is a complete illusion, because failing to make a choice, trying to be everything to everyone, guarantees that you will be misunderstood by everyone.
You just become invisible.
You become a watered-down, confusing, mediocre mess. Making the hard, terrifying choice to limit your audience, to choose a specific lane, is the only mathematical way to make your value undeniable to the people who actually keep your business alive.
The practical takeaway here for anyone listening is profound. Look at your own business or the startup project you're working on, or even the freelance service you provide as a professional, and analyze it ruthlessly through the lens of those 4 symptoms.
You have to be honest with yourself.
Are you constantly, exhaustingly explaining yourself to new prospects? Are your sales cycles taking twice as long as they should? Are people leaving shortly after they buy? Are they constantly arguing with you about your price?
If any of those ring true,
You have to realize that you do not have a tactical marketing problem. You do not have an incompetent sales team. You have a foundational strategy problem. You have a positioning problem.
you need to stop staring at the paint peeling off the walls, grab a flashlight, go down into the basement, and check the foundation.
So what does this all mean? If we take all of these pieces, the absurdity of the rotten egg omelet, the brilliance of playing Bobby Fischer in a tennis match, the 40-year gap in business education, the tragic cascade of the 4 deadly symptoms, and the terrifying power of making strategic trade-offs, how do we synthesize this?
Right.
What is the core truth we can walk away with?
If we synthesize this entire discussion into the true soul of the chapter, it comes down to one memorable, paradigm-shifting insight. Positioning is not marketing.
It's not.
It is not copywriting. It is the architectural blueprint of your product's context in the world. It is the deliberate, courageous, strategic act of setting the rules of the game so that your product's awesomeness is completely undeniably obvious to the exact people who need it most.
You are not at the mercy of the market.
No. You don't have to just float out there in the void and hope that the consumer's brain eventually figures it out. You have the power to define the market.
You build the arena.
Yeah.
You set the rules. You choose the game.
And when you finally do that, the wind shifts. Everything you do in marketing, in sales, and product development suddenly requires less effort because you have the macroeconomic wind at your back.
That is an incredibly empowering realization. It shifts you from being a reactive victim of the market to being a proactive architect of your own context.
Absolutely.
Thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the invisible forces that dictate success and failure. Now that we understand the catastrophic cost of getting positioning wrong, the baffled prospects, the wasted venture capital, the commodity price wars, the obvious question is, how do we actually build this context from the ground up?
That's the million-dollar question.
In our next deep dive, we are going to uncover exactly what context setting looks like in the real world. And trust me, you won't want to miss it because it involves a famous, world-class violinist, a gritty subway station, and a fascinating psychological experiment that proves just how easily human beings can be completely tricked by their surroundings.
It really highlights how incredibly fragile human perception is and how easily it can be manipulated by context. So, to leave you with a final lingering question to explore on your own before our next session, think about your absolute favorite product. The one you are fiercely loyal to, the one you unconditionally recommend to everyone you meet. If you had discovered that exact same product sitting on a dusty discount shelf at a dollar store, completely stripped of its premium branding and context, would you still have perceived its value?
Oh, that's a great question.
Ask yourself, in your own life and business, how much of what you value is simply a product of the context it was placed in?
Imagine for a second that you were standing in a busy subway station.
Okay, I'm there.
Right, so let's say it's like 7:51 a.m. You've got a coffee in one hand, your briefcase in the other, and your brain is just entirely consumed by this 8 a.m. meeting you're about to walk into.
Yeah, full tunnel vision, just trying to get through the commute.
Exactly. But over the din of the trains and the shuffling boots, you hear someone playing the violin. And not just, playing it casually, but performing the chaconne by Johann Sebastian Bach.
Oh, wow. Which is arguably one of the most complex, grueling, and just beautiful pieces of music ever composed for a solo instrument.
It really is. And the musician is playing it on a Stradivarius violin worth roughly $3.5 million.
Incredible.
So does the crowd stop? Do they weep? Do they throw $100 bills into his violin case?
Well, it's the ultimate fantasy of the pure artist, isn't it? The idea that undeniable, objective brilliance will just act like a magnet, halting the chaos of the world simply by existing.
But that's not what happens. The reality completely shatters that fantasy. Because the answer to whether the crowd goes wild or completely ignores this once-in-a-generation performance relies entirely on one thing.
The context.
Yes, whether the musician is wearing a tuxedo in a hushed concert hall or a baseball cap standing next to a subway garbage can.
Right. It's a harsh truth.
We spend years, sometimes decades, perfecting our music, whatever that is. We obsess over our products, our skills, our business ideas. We write the perfect code, or we design the ultimate feature set.
But if we place that masterpiece in the wrong context, we don't just become underappreciated, we become completely invisible.
Completely invisible. And that is what we are taking a deep dive into today. We are exploring the concept positioning as context.
Which is such a massive topic.
It really is. We're going to look at how the human brain processes value and why changing the mental frame of reference around your product can transform it. You could take something that is confusing and easily ignored and turn it into a completely obvious must-have solution.
Yeah, and if you are listening to this right now, whether you're an entrepreneur, a product manager, a marketer, or just someone trying to get a new idea off the ground, this is critical.
Absolutely critical.
Because even a world-class offering is going to fail if you leave its context up to chance.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And to really grasp the magnitude of how context overrides objective quality, we need to dig into the mechanics of that subway scenario you just described. Because this isn't just a hypothetical thought experiment.
Right. This actually happened.
Yeah, it was an experiment orchestrated by the Washington Post featuring Joshua Bell.
Let's paint the full picture here for anyone who doesn't know him. Joshua Bell is not just a guy who is good at the violin.
Not at all.
He is an internationally acclaimed virtuoso. We are talking about a musician who routinely sells out the greatest concert halls in the world, where people happily pay $300 a ticket just to sit in the same room as him.
Yeah, I think Interview magazine once wrote that his playing tells human beings why they bother to live.
Wow. Yeah, so he represents the absolute pinnacle of human musical achievement.
So the Washington Post decides to run a social experiment. They wanted to strip away the concert hall, strip away the marketing, and see if true beauty transcends its environment.
And what did they do?
They took this world-class musician, armed him with his multi-million-dollar Stradivarius, and placed him outside the L'Enfant Plaza subway station in Washington, D.C.
Right in the middle of the morning commute.
Exactly. And the result was devastating. I mean, almost nothing happened. He played for roughly 45 minutes.
45 minutes of literal genius.
Yes. And out of the 1,000-plus people who walked past him, only 7 stopped to listen for more than a minute.
7. That's just wild. Let's break down the psychology of why that happened, because it's not that the commuters were uncultured or ignorant.
Right. It's not a failure of the audience.
Exactly. Bell's product, the actual acoustic waves he was generating, was objectively flawless. But the contextual clues completely sabotaged the brain's ability to appreciate it.
Look at the specific sensory details of that scene. He wasn't elevated on a stage. He was standing on the same dirty tiles as everyone else.
Yeah, and he wasn't in a tuxedo. He was wearing a long-sleeved T-shirt and a Washington Nationals baseball cap.
Standing near a garbage can.
With his violin case open, with a few dollars tossed in to seed the tip jar.
The friction between the quality of the music and the visual of the environment is fascinating. Commuters are rushing by, heads down.
And didn't the shoe shine guy complain?
Yes. The shoe shine vendor, working a few yards away, actually thought Bell was being too loud and considered calling the police to make him stop.
That is unbelievable.
And people buying lottery tickets 20 feet away barely even registered that he was making a sound. The Post later tracked down a few of the commuters. One guy vaguely remembered him as, quote, just a guy trying to make a buck.
That phrase right there, just a guy trying to make a buck, is the key to everything we are talking about today. It proves something profound about human cognition.
Which is what?
That we rely entirely on context to make sense of a chaotic world. The human brain is an energy hog, but it's also incredibly efficient at conserving that energy.
Right, because we are constantly bombarded with an overwhelming amount of sensory information.
Exactly. To survive without short-circuiting, our brains have to use heuristic shortcuts. We filter out almost everything that isn't an immediate threat or an immediate goal.
Okay, let me stop you there and push back a little.
Go for it.
Because part of me hears this and thinks, well, shouldn't true quality act as its own shortcut?
You mean like the sheer brilliance of it should cut through?
Yeah. If you have a genuinely disruptive, innovative product, or in this case, if you're playing a Stradivarius like a literal genius, shouldn't that sheer excellence just pierce the veil? Doesn't undeniable quality speak for itself?
It's a comforting thought, especially for engineers and creators who want to believe that the best product automatically wins.
Right, the build it and they will come mentality.
Exactly. But cognitively speaking, no, it does not work that way. The evaluation process never even launches. Never even launches.
Think about it. When Joshua Bell is in a concert hall, the context acts as a massive neon sign to the brain saying, hey, pay attention, this requires your focus, this is highly valuable.
Oh, I see.
The tuxedo, the stage, the hushed audience, the heavy velvet curtains, the expensive ticket in your pocket, all of these are deliberate contextual cues. They lower the cognitive load required to decide if the music is good.
Because the environment has already answered the question for you.
Precisely. So without those cues, the brain has to do the heavy lifting from scratch. And at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday, nobody has the cognitive bandwidth to evaluate a street performer.
So the brain just scans the scene, baseball cap, subway station, open violin case, and the heuristic shortcut instantly categorizes him as a street performer.
Right. And the file folder in our brain labeled street performer immediately translates to background noise. The brain essentially mutes the objective quality of the music before the conscious mind can even register it.
It's like serving a Michelin star meal, prepared by a master chef, on a trash can lid in an alleyway. That is such a good analogy.
Right. Because it absolutely does not matter how perfectly seared that scallop is. It doesn't matter if it has a delicate truffle foam. Your brain's context filter is going to scream, contamination. Do not eat this.
Yeah, the visual and environmental context overrides the objective chemical makeup of the food. Nobody is taking a bite to find out if it's actually delicious.
The brain doesn't take a bite just to be sure. It shuts the process down to protect you.
That is the perfect biological equivalent. And if we pull this back to the business world, this is where the stakes get incredibly high.
How so?
Well, if context can entirely ruin something we already universally understand and appreciate, like beautiful music or high-end food, think about how critical context becomes when you are introducing something entirely new to the market.
Oh, man. Because when you launch a novel product, you aren't just fighting the environment. You're fighting the fact that people literally don't know what the thing is.
Exactly. They have no existing mental file folder for it.
Right. When people encounter a novel concept, they experience a cognitive gap. It's uncomfortable.
The brain hates ambiguity.
So, to understand this new thing, the brain immediately desperately searches for an anchor. It tries to compare the new thing to something it already knows.
And if you, the founder, the marketer, the product lead, if you don't deliberately provide that anchor, the customer isn't going to just patiently wait for you to explain it.
No, they will invent their own frame of reference on the spot.
And 99 times out of 100, they will invent the wrong one. If you leave context up to the customer, they will instinctively slot your product into an existing category that makes your innovation look unappealing, weird, expensive, or totally redundant.
The sources gave some great historical examples of this anchoring process. Think about when the first hoverboards came out.
Oh, yeah. People were so confused.
People looked at them and didn't know what to do. So the brain categorizes it based on visual similarity. Okay, it's a skateboard, but you don't push it.
Or when the iPad first launched.
Right. Before it created its own massive category, early reviewers looked at it and said, it's just a giant iPhone. Or it's a monitor missing its keyboard. We staple the new, scary thing to an old, safe thing just to process it.
Which brings us to a really brilliant, tangible example from our deep dive materials, the concept of the cake pop.
The cake pop. Okay, if you're listening, imagine you are the original inventor of the cake pop. You have spent weeks in your kitchen.
Perfecting the recipe.
Yes. You've taken perfectly big cake, formed it into a dense spherical ball, dipped it in chocolate, and shoved a stick into the bottom of it.
Sounds delicious.
It is, but you take it out to the street, and you present it to someone, and you call it a new type of cake. Their brain is going to instantly reject it.
Because you've handed them a cognitive contradiction, you anchored them to the word cake, but the physical object violates all the established rules of cake.
Right. The rules of cake are ancient and deeply ingrained. Cake implies a sit-down dessert. It implies a plate, a fork. It implies cutting a wedge out of a larger hole.
Exactly. Cake is fluffy. It crumbles.
And most importantly, cake absolutely does not have a wooden stick protruding from it.
Never.
So when you call it cake, the stick isn't seen as an innovation. The stick is an anomaly. It's a defect. The customer looks at it and thinks, why is my cake on a stick? How do I eat this with a fork? This is a fundamentally broken piece of cake.
They view it as a Frankencake. It's unsettling. But pay close attention to what happens when you deliberately change the verbal anchor. What if, instead of calling it cake, you hand them the exact same physical object and say, "This is a lollipop made out of cake for adults"?
It's like a magic trick. Suddenly, the stick isn't a defect. The stick makes perfect sense.
Of course it has a stick, it's a lollipop.
And the dense texture makes sense. The size makes sense. It instantly transforms from a weird, broken dessert into a highly functional, portable snack that you can eat with one hand while holding a coffee.
The physical object didn't change by a single molecule. The sugar content, the weight, the ingredients, identical. But the mental frame shifted, and in doing so, it changed the entire perceived value of the product.
This is where we transition from bakery analogies to the harsh reality of the tech and business world. Because what you are implying is that right now, there are brilliant startups and enterprise companies inventing incredible metaphorical cake pops.
Yes.
That they are stubbornly trying to sell them in the cake aisle.
It happens every single day. I see it constantly in B2B software, in hardware, in consumer goods. Founders build these incredible, deeply innovative products with unique, powerful features.
But because they are too close to the product, they use the wrong vocabulary to describe it.
Exactly. They frame it against the wrong competitors. They highlight features that only make sense in a different context, and they leave their prospects utterly baffled.
They're essentially standing by the subway garbage can playing the Bach Chaconne, wondering why nobody is throwing venture capital or purchase orders into their violin case.
That's exactly it. You have to deliberately choose the frame of reference that places your product's most unique, valuable features at the absolute center of the narrative.
So you have to make those features look like obvious, undeniable strengths, rather than weird anomalies.
If your competitive advantage is the stick, you cannot position yourself as a cake. You must be a lollipop.
Okay, so let's pause here. If the concept is this simple on paper, if changing the context is this powerful and obvious, why do so many brilliant, highly educated business leaders put their products in the wrong frame of reference to begin with? I mean, it can't just be stupidity.
It's definitely not stupidity. It's actually a byproduct of how things are built. According to the research we're diving into, creators usually fall into one of two major psychological traps. And the first one is a concept called being trapped by intention.
Trapped by intention, meaning you fall in love with your original blueprint.
Yes, exactly. You stick with the default positioning, the thing you intended to build when you first drew it on a whiteboard, even if the reality of the product naturally evolved into something entirely different during the development process.
Let's walk through the bigger analogy from the Stearns material, because it unpacks the business mechanics of this trap beautifully.
Sure.
Imagine you are an ambitious baker, and you set out to create the world's absolute best chocolate cake. Now, before you have even cracked an egg, before you have sifted a single ounce of flour, you have already made a massive cascade of invisible business decisions.
Just by using the word cake.
Yes, just by intending to make a cake, you have subconsciously locked in your business model. You have decided that you are competing against fancy patisseries and high-end restaurant desserts.
You've decided your target audience consists of dinner party hosts or people celebrating major milestones like birthdays or anniversaries.
You have likely decided your pricing model is premium, meaning your ingredients need to be incredibly decadent, and your packaging needs to be large and ornate.
Okay, so that is the intention. But then reality sets in. You go into the test kitchen, you start prototyping, and you're messing with the batter, adjusting the baking times, trying to get the moisture just right.
And through trial and error, you end up baking this tiny, self-contained, slightly dense cake that fits perfectly into a small, pleated paper wrapper.
Right. You intended to make a magnificent cake. But if we look at the physical output, you actually built a muffin.
And this is exactly where the trap snaps shut on the founder. The creator looks at the muffin and thinks, well, I know what the batter is. It's the exact same chocolate batter I designed for the cake. It tastes like the cake I envisioned. Therefore, this is just a miniature cake.
They refuse to let go of the intention, but failing to change the frame of reference from cake to muffin is a fatal error because it fundamentally alters the entire go-to-market strategy.
Let's really dig into this because the implications are staggering. The physical product did not change. The flour, the sugar, the cocoa powder, it is all identical.
Same exact thing.
But just by changing the noun we use to frame it, from cake to muffin, the entire revenue model, the supply chain, and the marketing strategy flip completely upside down.
Think about the operational differences. If you finally admit that you have a muffin, you are no longer targeting dinner party hosts. You're now targeting bleary-eyed morning commuters.
You are no longer competing against a $40 artisanal tiramisu. You're competing against bagels, croissants, and donuts.
Exactly. You don't need a high-end boutique storefront that opens at noon. You need a drive-through window that opens at 5:30 a.m.
And you don't sell it alongside a bottle of champagne. You pair it with a dark roast coffee.
It's an entirely different universe of commerce. The distribution channels change, the shelf life expectations change, and yet so many software developers or product engineers refuse to accept that they built a muffin.
Because they wrote Next Generation Cake on their seed round pitch deck 2 years ago.
Exactly. They promised their investors a cake. So they are going to force this tiny paper-wrapped pastry into the high-end cake market, and they're going to spend millions of dollars on marketing trying to convince people that it's a personal-sized dinner party dessert.
Even while every customer who looks at it thinks this belongs next to my morning coffee.
The sunk cost fallacy is incredibly powerful here. Founders tie their ego to the original intention. So the practical takeaway for anyone listening to this is do not be precious about your original blueprint.
Because the road from a conceptual idea to a market-ready product is almost never a straight line.
Never. You have to ruthlessly evaluate your product for what it actually is right now, today, in the hands of the end user. You must position the product you have, not the product you intended to build.
Okay, I buy that. The danger of blinding yourself with your own blueprint is clear. But let's say I'm self-aware. I avoid trap one. I accept that I build a muffin. I position it perfectly for the breakfast crowd. The morning commuters love it. The business is booming.
Sounds great.
Am I safe? Can I just lock in that positioning and just boast?
They're not even close.
Yeah.
Because if you avoid trap one, you walk right into the crosshairs of trap two being trapped by a shifting market.
Ah.
You can carefully design a product for a specific market and position it with absolute perfection. But markets are living, breathing ecosystems. They are not static.
They evolve constantly due to shifting cultural trends, new competitor technologies, or changing economic landscapes.
And suddenly, the positioning that made you a market leader becomes completely obsolete.
Let's continue with our bakery saga to see how this plays out in real time. So, you successfully avoided the cake trap. You embraced the muffin identity. In fact, you leaned into a very specific niche.
Okay, what's the niche?
You realized your muffin is incredibly nutrient-dense, so you start marketing it as a specialized diet muffin.
Makes sense.
It's packed with healthy fats, walnuts, chia seeds, and dates. And for 5 solid years, you have successfully sold this diet muffin to office workers who are actively counting calories and trying to lose a few pounds before summer.
It's a fantastic, reliable business model. You know exactly who your customer is, and you know exactly what value you are providing.
But then, seemingly overnight, your sales start to drop. The loyal office workers stop coming in. You panic. You start wondering if your quality has slipped.
So what do?
So you walk out of your shop, look across the street, and see a brand new bakery that just opened up. And they have a massive line stretching around the block. But the demographic is different. It's not just office workers.
Who is it?
It's CrossFit athletes, it's marathon runners, it's trendy wellness influencers in athleisure wear.
And when you walk over there and look in their pastry case to see what this revolutionary new product is, it is the exact same walnut, chia seed, and date pastry you've been baking for half a decade.
Identical ingredients, identical nutritional profile. But the bakery across the street isn't calling it a diet muffin.
What are they calling it?
They are positioning it as a gluten-free paleo energy snack.
That is brilliant and frankly devastating if you're the original baker, because your product was still phenomenal. Your recipe didn't degrade, but the market's vocabulary and the cultural values underlying that vocabulary shifted right under your feet.
The very concept of dieting became culturally outdated. It became associated with deprivation, restriction, and 1990s weight loss fads.
It was entirely replaced by a new cultural paradigm centered around concepts like clean eating, macro tracking, functional fuel, and paleo.
Your context essentially expired. It went past its sell-by date. And this raises an incredibly important question for anyone building a business, especially in fast-moving sectors like technology or consumer packaged goods.
How often do we sit isolated in our own corporate bubbles and completely miss these massive cultural and linguistic shifts?
It's the echo chamber effect.
Precisely. Think about the tech industry. You might have a brilliant team of developers sitting in a beautiful, exposed brick office in San Francisco,
Right, staring at their laptops, drinking artisanal pour-over coffee.
completely insulated from their end users. And they might completely miss the fact that the way their actual customers, say emergency room nurses, factory floor managers, or retail logistics workers, view their daily workflow has fundamentally shifted.
The words those nurses use to describe their pain points today are different than the words they used 3 years ago.
If you're listening to this and you've noticed that your marketing copy suddenly feels a little stale or your sales cycles are getting longer, this might be exactly what's happening.
You can't just set your positioning and forget it. It is an active, continuous process of alignment. You have to constantly monitor the cultural and competitive landscape.
Because if you don't ensure your context is still fresh and resonant, somebody across the street is going to take your exact feature set, slap a new culture label on it, and steal your entire customer base without writing a single line of better code.
You have to be hyper-aware of the language your best customers are currently using to describe their problems and their desired solutions.
Mm.
If they stop saying diet and start saying fuel, your product needs to become fuel immediately.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about violins and subway stations, cake pops, and paleo snacks. These are great cognitive warm-ups. They help us understand the theory.
But if you're an entrepreneur or a product leader listening to this, you might be thinking, that's cute for pastries,
Mm-hmm.
but I sell highly complex B2B enterprise solutions.
Right. So let's look at the database epiphany from our deep dive sources.
This is a wild story.
It really is. This is a story where changing the frame of reference didn't just tweak a marketing campaign. It literally saved an entire enterprise software business from the brink of total failure.
Let's get into it.
This is a fantastic, heavy-hitting, real-world application of everything we've discussed. The author of the source material was brought in to work with a startup founded by a group of incredibly intelligent, deeply technical PhDs.
Okay.
These founders had built a revolutionary new kind of database technology. It was capable of processing analytical queries at a speed that was previously thought impossible.
Sounds like a winner.
Right. Now, because these founders had spent their entire academic and professional lives deeply entrenched in the world of database architecture, they were, quite literally, database people, they naturally defaulted to calling their new product a database.
It makes complete sense. We just talked about Trap 1. They intended to build a database. The underlying code utilized database principles, so they shoved it right into the database frame of reference.
But the painful, expensive reality of this bad context hit them like a brick wall the moment they tried to take it to market.
Why?
Because when you sit in a boardroom and position yourself as a database, you trigger a very specific, deeply ingrained set of assumptions and fears in the customer's mind. In the enterprise software world, the operational database market is dominated by massive, heavily entrenched legacy players, companies like Oracle.
Right. Let's step into the shoes of the buyer for a second. If I'm the chief information officer of a Fortune 500 company, my operational database is the beating heart of my business.
It handles everything.
It handles every single transaction, every inventory update, every customer record in real time. If you, a relatively unknown startup, walk into my office and pitch me a new database, my brain immediately goes to the catastrophic risk of migration.
Just massive anxiety.
Ripping out Oracle and replacing it with an unproven startup's database is a career-ending move for a CIO if the system goes down for even 10 minutes. It is a massive, terrifying headache. I don't care how fast your technology is, the risk outweighs the reward.
Exactly. The context of database meant the sales meetings were dead on arrival. The startup's reps would walk in, put up a slide that said next generation database, and the prospect's mental shield would instantly go up.
Mentally check out.
Yeah, look at their watches, and the meetings would end early. And the problem compounded. It wasn't just customers who rejected the context. Investors refused to fund the startup.
Really?
The venture capitalist looked at the positioning and said, the database market is completely saturated and mature. Oracle has already won this war. You are unfundable because you cannot beat the incumbent giants.
It's a tragic situation. They are drowning. Their product is a legitimate technological breakthrough, but it's suffocating inside the wrong mental frame.
But then the turning point happens.
And it wasn't a stroke of genius from the founders.
Rare.
It was a lifeline thrown by a customer.
Yes. They are in yet another grueling meeting with a prospect, and this prospect says something that completely alters the trajectory of the company. The prospect leans back and says, you know, we don't actually see you as a database. Based on what this does, we see you as a data warehouse.
Wow. That is the multi-million-dollar light bulb moment. Because a data warehouse is a completely different frame of reference with a completely different risk profile.
Let's explain the functional difference here because it's crucial. An
Hmm.
operational database is designed for high-speed single transactions, like recording a customer buying a coffee right now. It requires row-level locking. It has to be perfectly synchronized.
Okay, and a data warehouse.
A data warehouse, on the other hand, is analytical. It doesn't run the cash registers. Instead, it stores massive amounts of historical data, maybe 10 years of global sales data, so the business intelligence team can run complex queries to find macro trends.
So when the prospect says data warehouse, the startup founders initially hesitate. Why? Because of the intention trap again. They thought, wait, we don't have all the standard features of a traditional data warehouse. We aren't a perfect one-to-one match for that category.
Right. But here is the critical insight. Even though they lacked some legacy data warehouse features, their product's absolute unique strength, which was executing insanely fast analytics across massive, billions of rows data sets, perfectly aligned with what the market actually wanted and valued most from a modern data warehouse.
Think about the emotional and psychological shift in the buyer's mind. This is the core of positioning. When the startup pitched a database, the CIO's brain said, ugh, migration nightmare, existential risk, Oracle is safer, get these guys out of my office.
But when they changed the frame,
When they updated their deck and pitched a data warehouse, the CIO's brain said, oh, I have a huge bottleneck with our analytics. My data science team complains every day that their queries take hours to run. You can make it instant. I have budget for this. Tell me more.
the resistance just vanished. The existential dread of ripping out the operational core was gone. Because a data warehouse sits alongside the operational database. It doesn't replace it. By simply shifting the mental anchor, they removed the risk and highlighted their exact competitive advantage.
It's like trying to sell a high-performance sports car by comparing it to a family minivan. If you put your two-seater sports car in the family van category, the buyer looks at it and says, this is terrible. It has no trunk space, I can't fit car seats in the back, and the suspension is way too stiff. This is the worst family van ever built.
Right, exactly.
But if you shift the context and say, no, this is a track-ready sports car, suddenly the exact same features become selling points. The stiff suspension means better cornering. The lack of rear seats means less weight and faster acceleration. As a family van, it's a failure. As a sports car, it's a masterpiece.
That is a much more accurate business analogy. The features don't change, but their perceived value inverses entirely based on the category. But if we look at the deepest, most profound insight of this database story, it's that repositioning the product didn't just change the marketing copy on the website.
Right.
It didn't just change the sales script. It literally changed the engineering of the company itself.
Wait, let's pause there because the implications of that are staggering. You're saying marketing didn't just sell the product better? The act of repositioning fundamentally altered the technical development of the software.
Absolutely. Once the founders fully accepted that their true market identity was an analytical data warehouse, they completely overhauled their internal product roadmap. They stopped wasting engineering hours trying to build operational features just to match Oracle.
That makes total sense.
Instead, they redirected all their development resources into engineering features that supported their new identity. They optimized for columnar storage. They built better integrations with business intelligence dashboards. The context didn't just dictate the sales strategy, the context dictated the actual code being written.
The practical takeaway here for anyone building a company is massive. You have to listen intensely to your happiest, most engaged customers. If the people who love your product the most, the ones who actually get value out of it, are describing it using different words than your own marketing deck does, you need to pay attention immediately.
They are likely handing you a multi-million-dollar shift in context on a silver platter.
They are acting as your translators. They are showing you the exact frame of reference where your unique attributes stop looking like oddities and start looking like obvious, undeniable strengths.
Exactly. Okay, let's pull all of these threads together and synthesize what we've unpacked today. What we have uncovered in this deep dive is that positioning is not just a marketing exercise.
Right.
It is not about writing a catchy slogan or picking a disruptive brand color or writing clever ad copy. Positioning is the deliberate, strategic act of context setting.
It is a foundational layer of business strategy that makes every other part of your company function properly. From Joshua Bell struggling to get attention in a subway station to realizing your weird cake is actually a highly functional lollipop.
To updating your stale diet muffin into a premium paleo snack, to pivoting a dying database into a highly funded data warehouse. The core insight remains undeniable. Most products, most ideas, and most human skills are only recognized as exceptional when we understand them within their best possible frame of reference.
If you let the market guess your context, or if you lazily just accept whatever default context you originally intended on day one, you are forcing your customers to do the heavy lifting. You are making them expend precious cognitive energy to figure out why you are valuable.
And as we learned with the rushed commuters in the DC subway, customers will not do that work. They are too busy, they have too much cognitive load.
They are worried about their own lives. They will simply categorize you as irrelevant and walk right past you.
You cannot expect the audience to build the stage for you. You have to build the stage, you have to turn on the spotlights, and you have to hand them the program. You have to actively construct the environment where your value is instantly obvious.
So if you are listening to this right now, and you've ever sat in a sales meeting where the prospect's eyes just glazed over, or you've ever felt like you have to constantly explain what your product isn't before you can explain what it is, you now know why that is happening. You see the invisible gravitational pull of the frame of reference.
But the lingering question is, how do you actually fix it? How do you systematically build that perfect context around your ideas step by step without just crossing your fingers and hoping a brilliant prospect hands you the answer in a meeting?
How do you deliberately engineer that aha moment for your customers on command?
Leave the guesswork behind, because in our next deep dive, we are going to completely dismantle the old broken positioning statement that they teach in traditional business schools.
We are going to replace it with a bulletproof, step-by-step formula. We are going to show you exactly how to uncover your true competitive alternatives, map your unique attributes, and isolate the exact features that make you undeniably, obviously awesome.
Until then, take a hard look at your own work and ask yourself, are you playing your masterpiece standing next to the garbage can, or are you finally ready to build your concert hall? Imagine discovering that the reason your business is struggling actually has nothing to do with your product.
Right.
Like, it isn't your marketing budget, it isn't your sales team. What if the real bottleneck is simply that you've trapped yourself inside a single rigid sentence you wrote on a whiteboard, 3 years ago?
Oh, man. Yeah.
What if everything you thought you knew about writing a traditional positioning statement is actually destroying your competitive advantage?
It's a daunting realization for a lot of founders and product teams. We pour millions of dollars and thousands of engineering hours into building these incredibly complex, nuanced features.
Yeah.
But then we completely neglect the cognitive framework that tells the outside world what those features actually mean in a business context.
We just let the narrative default to whatever is easiest. And that is exactly the structural flaw we are breaking down in today's deep dive.
Exactly.
Our mission today is to help you unlearn a fundamental piece of business dogma, like something that is still actively taught in almost every single MBA program out there.
Which is wild.
It is. And we want to replace it with a dynamic, causal framework that actually dictates how a product should go to market and win. We're working off a very specific stack of sources today. We are extracting the core methodology from Chapter 3 of April Dunford's book, Obviously Awesome.
Specifically, the architecture she outlines for the 5 foundational components of effective positioning, plus one optional accelerator. And this isn't just theory.
Right.
For anyone building a company, launching a new product line, we're just trying to figure out why an objectively superior piece of software isn't closing enterprise deals.
Which happens all the time.
All the time. Understanding this interconnected framework replaces that archaic fill-in-the-blanks positioning exercise with an actual diagnostic tool.
But before we get to the cure, we have to deeply understand the disease.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the villain of this story, which is the traditional positioning statement. If you've ever read classic tech strategy books, you know the template.
Oh, the dreaded template.
Right. It's usually something like, for a target buyer, product is a category which provides benefit unlike competitor.
It sounds so incredibly rigorous, right?
It does. It makes a team feel like they've done their strategic homework.
But the danger lies in that false sense of rigor. And the source material illustrates this perfectly with the author's own experience early in her career. She was a newly hired marketer at IBM, and she was tasked with launching a database product called DB2.
Okay, classic big tech scenario.
Exactly.
Yeah.
IBM, being this massive, process-driven tech giant, had a mandatory release protocol. So, quote-unquote, positioning was just one of the checkboxes on a long corporate runway.
Right.
She assumed she was going to learn this highly sophisticated proprietary methodology for bringing tech to market.
And instead, she was handed a worksheet with blank spaces. I mean, it's essentially a corporate game of Mad Libs.
That's a highly accurate way to look at it, actually.
Yeah.
The fatal flaw of the template is that it forces a team to make massive foundational assumptions.
Without testing them.
It's exactly, without providing any mechanism to test if those assumptions are rooted in market reality.
Yeah.
So in the DB2 example, her specific version of the product was completely new. It ran on standard microcomputers, not those massive legacy mainframes.
Okay.
Yet because the static template demands a market category, she just filled in database. Because, well, historically that's what DB2 was.
And because the template demands a competitor, she probably just filled in Oracle.
Bingo. Oracle was the 800-pound gorilla of databases at the time.
So by doing that, by blindly treating the past as prologue, she accidentally drafted her team into a head-to-head ground war with the reigning champion in a highly saturated market.
Yes.
She didn't pause to ask if this new microcomputer version of DB2 was actually playing a completely different game.
She assumed the context was fixed.
Hmm.
And that's the issue. The traditional positioning statement assumes you already have perfect visibility into the best possible way to frame your product.
Right. It doesn't guide you to a strategy.
No, it just documents your current biases.
Right.
Once it's written, it just gets filed away in a shared drive somewhere. The sales team ignores it because it sounds like marketing jargon.
The product team ignores it because it doesn't inform the roadmap.
Exactly. And the marketing team only uses it to write incredibly generic website copy.
It's that Mad Lib structure. It creates sentences that are grammatically correct but strategically bankrupt. Like, for synergistic enterprises, our platform is a paradigm-shifting tool.
Yes. It makes you invisible. It traps you in your own history.
So if we are throwing the Mad Libs template into the fire, where do we actually start? Because, a product manager or founder can't just stare at a blank whiteboard. There has to be a starting node.
Well, the starting node is to break positioning down into its atomic parts. We move away from a static sentence and adopt a sequential chain of 5 components.
Okay, 5 components.
Yes, and the critical rule here, and honestly this is where most teams fail, is that the order is non-negotiable.
You can't skip around.
You cannot skip ahead. Each component derives its validity entirely from the component that immediately precedes it.
A logical chain of causality. I like that. I want to trace this chain from the very first link. And that first link is identifying the competitive alternative.
But notice the phrasing there. It is not identify your competitors.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the definition of a competitive alternative in this framework is strictly what would your target customer do to solve their problem if your solution simply did not exist.
Wow, okay. That distinction completely rewrites the research process. Because if I'm a founder, I'm obsessed with my direct competitors, right?
Naturally.
Like, I'm tracking their feature releases, I'm reading their PR announcements, I'm analyzing their pricing tiers. You're saying that might be a complete waste of time.
It is often a huge distraction. Product creators operate in an echo chamber. They assume the customer is navigating the exact same landscape they are. But the customer's slate is usually much cleaner. They aren't reading niche industry blogs to compare obscure B2B software tools. The yardstick the customer uses to define better is simply whatever duct tape solution they are employing right now.
The status quo. The invisible competitor. I've always thought of it like this. Let's say you invent a truly revolutionary new microwave.
Okay.
It uses advanced laser technology. It heats food evenly on a molecular level. It's an absolute marvel of engineering. And you spend your entire marketing budget running ads comparing your laser specs to the magnetron specs of the rival microwave brand across town.
You're obsessed with winning the microwave tech argument.
Exactly. But you never actually sat in your target customer's kitchen. If you did, you'd realize they don't even own a microwave. They're perfectly content eating their leftover pizza cold.
The cold pizza is the competitive alternative.
Yes.
And if your entire messaging architecture is built around lasers versus magnets, you are fighting a war on the wrong battlefield. You're answering a question the customer hasn't even asked yet.
Because the friction of moving from cold pizza to laser microwave is totally different than the friction of moving from old microwave to new microwave.
Vastly different. The source text brings this into the business realm with some sobering examples. When you force a customer to articulate their alternative, the answer is rarely a venture-backed startup.
What is it usually?
The answer is often, we just hire an intern to manually input the data.
Hmm.
Or, We use a massive, brittle Excel spreadsheet with 90 macros.
Oh, wow.
Or, perhaps most terrifyingly for a sales team, the alternative is simply to do nothing and endure the pain.
Do nothing and suffer. The undefeated champion of lost enterprise deals.
Right. We laugh, but status quo bias is the strongest force in enterprise sales. The cognitive load and institutional friction required to change a workflow are immense.
So true.
Therefore, you cannot position your product effectively if you are benchmarking your value against a startup the buyer has ever heard of. If the real alternative in the buyer's mind is a spreadsheet, then every single claim you make about your product must be measured directly against Microsoft Excel.
So if I'm a founder listening to this, my immediate action item is to audit my pitch deck. I need to look at my competitor slide.
Definitely.
If it's just a grid with my logo and 3 other startup logos with check marks showing I have more features, I'm probably living in an echo chamber. I need to replace those logos with interns, spreadsheets, and the mute button.
Exactly. And once you've anchored yourself to the harsh reality of the actual alternative, you can move to the second link in the causal chain.
Yeah.
Isolating your unique attributes.
Okay, the features, the secret sauce.
Yes, but with a highly specific constraint. An attribute in this context must be an objective, provable fact about your product or company that the alternative completely lacks.
Wait, I have to push back hard here. Provable fact sounds incredibly dry.
I know.
Let's look at Apple. Apple didn't build a multi-trillion-dollar empire by listing processor speeds and RAM allocations. They built it on subjective feelings, on think different, on aesthetics, on a sense of identity. If we restrict attributes to objective specs, don't we risk stripping all the emotion and brand power out of our positioning?
It's a very common pushback, but it conflates brand positioning for a mature, ubiquitous consumer company with product positioning for a company trying to carve out a B2B market or establish a new foothold.
Okay, fair.
A startup is not Apple. You do not have billions of dollars to spend conditioning the market to associate a feeling with your logo. Furthermore, even Apple's core differentiators are actually rooted in provable attributes.
Like what?
Like proprietary M-series silicon chips, exclusive ecosystem integration like iMessage, a closed-loop supply chain that allows for specific physical tolerances in their hardware. They translate those into feelings later, but the bedrock is completely objective.
Okay, I see the distinction. If you are a new software tool, you don't have the luxury of selling vibes. You have to sell utility. But this raises a massive problem I see in almost every pitch deck.
Let me guess. Ease of use.
Yes, what about subjective claims like ease of use? Every single software company on Earth claims their UI is intuitive and their platform is easy to use. If subjective claims are banned, how does a team actually leverage user experience as an attribute?
By doing the hard work to translate the subjective opinion into an objective metric. If you want to claim ease of use as an attribute, your marketing team's opinion is invalid.
So you need data.
You need third-party validation, hard data, or an easily demonstrable mechanic. Can you objectively prove that your onboarding takes 0 training hours compared to the spreadsheet alternative, which requires a 2-week certification?
Right.
Can an independent analyst verify that a specific workflow takes 3 clicks in your software versus 15 clicks in the competitors? If you can quantify it, it's an attribute. If you can't, it's fluff and it gets thrown out of the framework.
It gets thrown out because the buyer's defense mechanisms are just too high. They've been burned by easy-to-use claims 100 times.
Exactly. So an attribute could be a technical feature, like a 15-megapixel camera. It could be a delivery model, such as being a purely cloud-based architecture versus an on-premise installation.
For like a specific integration.
Right. The fact that you have a native API hook into Salesforce. Or it could be corporate expertise. If you are a consultancy, the provable fact that you have 12 Tier 1 international banks as active clients is an objective attribute that the alternative, say, build an internal team, lacks.
Now, I know the source text draws a very sharp line between 2 types of attributes, and I really want to explore this because it feels like a trap that tears marketing and product teams apart. The distinction between consideration attributes and retention attributes.
It is a critical fault line. A consideration attribute is a capability that the customer deeply cares about when they're deciding whether or not to sign the contract.
Okay.
A retention attribute is a capability they care about when deciding whether to renew the contract a year later.
So things like world-class customer support or a really clean user interface.
Those are classic retention attributes. They are absolutely vital for the long-term survival of the business. You need them to prevent churn.
But they don't get you in the door.
No, they rarely, if ever, drive the initial purchase decision. A prospect is not going to buy a piece of supply chain management software that doesn't actually solve their core logistics problem, just because your customer's success team promises to answer the phone on the first ring.
It makes total sense. I'm not choosing a surgeon based on the magazines in their waiting room.
Exactly.
I'm choosing them based on their provable surgical success rate. The magazines are a retention attribute. The success rate is the consideration attribute.
That's a great analogy.
So, the practical takeaway for the product and marketing teams listening: take your massive list of features and ruthlessly filter them. Discard the fluff. Discard the retention attributes. Keep only the provable, objective facts that actively differentiate you from the cold pizza or the spreadsheet.
Which naturally forces us to the third link in the chain. You have an isolated list of unique, provable attributes. But a feature in a vacuum is useless. We must transition to value and proof.
Because having a shiny feature isn't a reason to wire a vendor $100,000.
It is not. Features enable benefits, but benefits must be translated into value. This component is an active translation process.
So how do we define value here?
Value is the specific, measurable business outcome that your unique attributes enable for the customer, mapped directly to a goal they are actively trying to achieve.
Let's dissect the translation process using the examples from the text, because I think they make the mechanics very clear. Let's start with the 15-megapixel camera. That is the raw objective feature. What is the benefit?
The immediate physical benefit of that feature is sharp photo images. But a sharp image is still just a state of being. We have to push further to find the business value.
We have to run it through the so what test.
Precisely. You have sharp images, so what? The value is that these images can be printed in massive billboard-sized formats without pixelating, allowing an ad agency to reuse the same asset across digital and physical campaigns.
Oh, okay.
Now you have tied a technical specification to a strategic business outcome.
Let's do another one, perhaps a more complex B2B software example. The source mentions a patented fuzzy logic algorithm.
That is the feature. Highly technical, provable, objective.
But if I walk into a procurement office and say fuzzy logic algorithm, they're going to show me the door.
They absolutely will.
So I translate it to a benefit. It processes data to provide faster response times.
Still not enough. Faster response times is a benefit, but we must ask, so what?
Right. So what if the database responds in 50 milliseconds instead of 2 seconds?
Because that speed allows your customer support representatives to query a user's entire historical profile while the user is still speaking their first sentence on the phone.
Okay, but again, I'm the buyer, so what?
Which means the rep can solve the ticket on the first call, completely eliminating callbacks, which reduces your server load and decreases your overall support center operating costs by 20%.
Oh, now we have arrived at the value. We went from fuzzy logic algorithm all the way to slashing operational support costs.
I love the so what heuristic.
It's powerful. It acts as an aggressive BS detector for marketing copy. If you state a feature, and I, role-playing as the cynical buyer, can look you in the eye and say, so what, then your positioning is incomplete. You haven't reached the terminal node of value.
And practically speaking, as you run your 10 or 15 unique attributes through this translation layer, you will begin to notice patterns. You will find that several distinct technical features actually map to the exact same terminal value.
Right.
The methodology advises clustering these various attributes into a tight narrative of 1 to 4 value themes.
Because you don't want a pitch deck with 50 bullet points of value. It's overwhelming.
It dilutes the impact entirely. You find the core overarching outcomes. Perhaps 4 of your features map to mitigating compliance risk. 3 other features map to accelerating time to market. Those become your value themes. The features are simply the empirical proof that you can actually deliver on those themes.
We've established the alternative. We've isolated the provable attributes. We've translated them into concrete value themes. This brings us to the fourth component, which I think is where the most intense internal company politics usually flare up: target market characteristics.
Oh yeah, it is highly contentious because it involves saying no to revenue. Now that we know the exact value themes we provide, we have to isolate who cares about them.
But it's not just who cares, it's who cares a lot. It has to be an intense, visceral need.
That intensity is the filter. The target market in this framework is not defined by broad demographic sweeps. It consists of the specific cohort of customers who care so deeply about your specific value that they buy quickly, they don't negotiate aggressively on price, and they naturally champion your product to their peers.
And this is where the MBA textbooks often lead people astray. Traditional demographic segmentation, like defining your target market as mid-sized manufacturing companies in the Midwest or males aged 18 to 35, is completely insufficient for positioning.
Demographics tell you almost nothing about a buyer's actual pain points. Actionable segmentation relies on identifying the specific, observable characteristics that trigger a desperate need for the value you just defined.
Let's move away from basic examples and look at a complex B2B scenario. Imagine a startup that builds an API security compliance tool. It automatically scans code to ensure personal data isn't leaking through API endpoints. The value is eliminating the risk of massive regulatory fines.
Okay.
Now, technically, any company that builds software could use this. So the marketing team might want to define the target market as all enterprise software companies.
Which is a catastrophic error. If you target all enterprise software companies,
Yeah.
your sales team is going to spend thousands of hours trying to educate a gaming company that doesn't process sensitive financial data on why they should care about API compliance.
Because they don't have that problem.
The gaming company has low regulatory risk. They don't feel the pain. They will drag out the sales cycle for 9 months and then ghost you.
They fail the cares a lot test.
Exactly. So we have to look for triggering characteristics. Who cares deeply about regulatory fines? Well, what if we narrow the target market to fintech startups that process highly sensitive, personally identifiable information, and crucially, who have recently failed an external SOC 2 security audit?
Oh, wow. That is incredibly specific.
And incredibly powerful. A fintech company that just failed a security audit is bleeding. They are terrified. They cannot close their next round of funding until the compliance issue is fixed.
Right.
When you show them your automated compliance scanner, you don't have to educate them on the value. They already understand the value intimately. They will demand to sign the contract.
But here's the pushback from the boardroom. I hear this from founders and venture capitalists constantly. If we only target fintechs that just failed an audit, we are artificially shrinking our total addressable market.
The TAM argument.
Yeah, we are leaving millions of dollars on the table by ignoring the gaming companies and the e-commerce companies. We need a massive TAM to justify our evaluation. How does the framework reconcile that fear?
The framework argues that targeting narrowly does not shrink your potential market. It accelerates your ability to capture it. The fear of a small TAM ignores the reality of resource scarcity.
What do you mean?
A startup only has so much marketing budget, and a sales rep only has so many hours in a week. If you deploy those scarce resources broadly across all software companies, you dilute your message. You spend all your money trying to convince lukewarm, apathetic buyers.
You're trying to boil the ocean.
And you run out of fuel before the water even gets warm. By targeting narrowly, you concentrate all your resources on the ecstatic fans. You dominate that specific niche rapidly. You close deals faster, your win rates skyrocket, and your customer acquisition cost plummets.
It creates a highly efficient engine.
Exactly, to hit your near-term revenue goals.
And you can always expand the target market later. Once you dominate the post-audit fintechs and build a massive war chest of cash, then you can pivot and start building features for the e-commerce sector. But you have to survive long enough to do that. You have to start by boiling a single cup of water.
Identifying those triggering characteristics allows you to practically fire your bad leads. It allows the sales team to disqualify the gaming company on the first call, saving everyone time.
So we know who we are targeting. We know exactly what value they desperately need. This leads us to the fifth component, which acts as the psychological wrapper for everything we've discussed, the market category.
This is perhaps the most powerful cognitive lever in the entire methodology. Once you know who cares a lot, you must create a context that makes your value intuitively obvious to them within the first 5 seconds of interaction.
Right.
The market category provides that context.
It's a cognitive heuristic. It's the brain's way of taking a shortcut.
The human brain cannot evaluate every new piece of information from first principles. It relies on categorization. When you declare that your product exists within a specific market category, let's say CRM software, you instantly trigger a massive pre-existing web of assumptions in the buyer's mind.
They immediately assume they know who your competitors are.
Exactly, like Salesforce, HubSpot. And they know what your core feature set should be, contact management, pipeline tracking, and what your pricing architecture should look like per seat monthly licensing.
The category does the heavy lifting for you. But here is the terrifying part of the framework. The category you started in, the category your engineering team originally built the product for, might not be the category you actually belong in once you analyze your unique attributes and value.
It often isn't.
And if you choose the wrong category, you force your product to fight a war it cannot mathematically win.
Because you are fighting against expectations you were never designed to meet. The source material provides a brilliant case study on this regarding a product originally positioned as email for lawyers.
Let's dissect this because it perfectly illustrates the cognitive trap.
The company built a communication tool. They went to market calling it secure email. Because they declared the category as email, the target buyer's lawyers instantly triggered their mental heuristic for email clients. They compared it to a Microsoft Outlook or Gmail.
So the lawyers open the software, and their brain is running a checklist. Okay, this is email. Where is my integrated calendar? Where is my priority inbox routing? Where are my custom folder hierarchies?
And the product didn't have those things because it was built by a startup, not Microsoft. So the prospects evaluated it as a severely deficient, broken email client.
But the product actually had a massive, unique capability, right?
Yes. Its unique attribute was an incredibly sophisticated, context-aware security protocol for file sharing, which ensured confidential legal documents couldn't be intercepted or forwarded to the wrong party. This was a massive value for lawyers.
But the value was completely invisible because of the category.
Exactly.
Nobody expects their basic email client to execute bank-level secure file transferring, so the prospects didn't even know to look for it. They were too busy complaining about the missing calendar.
So, to solve the problem, the company didn't change a single line of code in the product. They changed the cognitive context. They repositioned the product. They stopped calling it email and declared a new market category, team collaboration software.
It's like flipping a switch in the buyer's brain.
Instantly, the frame of reference shifted. When a lawyer evaluates team collaboration software, they don't demand an integrated calendar. They already have Outlook for that.
Right, the expectations changed.
And in this new context, the secure file sharing wasn't an obscure hidden feature. It became an overwhelming, obvious competitive advantage against other basic collaboration tools. The unique value finally made logical sense.
This reminds me of a thought experiment. Imagine you are in the market for a new vehicle and you walk into a dealership and tell the salesperson, I am looking for a motorcycle.
Right.
The salesperson nods, walks you to the back, and pulls the tarp off a convertible sports car. If you are forced by the salesperson to evaluate that vehicle strictly by the criteria of a motorcycle, it is an absolute disaster.
It's way too heavy.
Too heavy, it's too wide to split lanes in traffic, and it has too many wheels. It is a failure of a motorcycle.
The evaluation criteria are rigged against it.
But if the salesperson simply steps back and changes the context, actually, sir, this isn't a motorcycle. This is a high-performance sports car. Your entire mental framework shifts. You stop looking for handlebars and start appreciating the horsepower and the aerodynamics.
Yeah.
The physical machine did not change. The raw materials are identical. But the category shift transformed it from a failure into a masterpiece.
The category dictates the rules of the game you are playing. If you are losing the game, if customers are constantly asking for features you don't have, or complaining about your price relative to competitors you don't track, do not immediately assume your product is broken. Assume your category is broken.
You have the power to change the game by declaring a different context.
You do.
That is incredibly empowering for a product team. You don't always have to build more features. Sometimes you just have to change the lens the market is looking through. Make the category work for you as a tailwind instead of fighting it as a headwind.
Well said.
We have now sequenced the core 5 components: alternative, attributes, value, target market, category. But the framework offers a 6th optional component, an accelerator.
Component 6. Relevant trends. You have built a rock-solid core positioning, but the market is noisy. How do you make your product feel urgent?
Right.
How do you move a prospect from, this is interesting, let's look at it next quarter, to we need to deploy this tomorrow? That is the function of a trend. You layer a macroeconomic or technological trend on top of your market category to demonstrate why your value is critical right now.
But there is a massive trap here that we need to navigate. People constantly conflate categories and trends.
It is the most common error in tech marketing today.
Yeah.
A market category describes what you are. A trend describes why you are highly relevant at this specific moment in time.
Got it.
If you try to use a trend as a substitute for a market category, you create a product that the author describes as cool but baffling.
The text uses the analogy of the pink couch, which I think clarifies the distinction perfectly.
It's a highly visual way to separate the two concepts. Let's say Pantone announces that the color of the year is a specific shade of pink. That is a macro trend in the design world.
Okay.
You, as a furniture manufacturer, can build a pink couch to capitalize on that momentum. Now, the couch is the market category. Everyone intuitively understands what a couch is, how many people can sit on it, what room it belongs in, and roughly what it should cost. The color pick simply makes it desirable for that specific season.
But you would never run an ad campaign claiming you were selling a pink.
Exactly. Pink doesn't give the buyer any functional context. Yet in the technology sector, companies do this every single day.
We see it constantly. We are an AI platform. We are a blockchain solution. AI is a trend. It is a technology, a capability, a color of paint. It is not a category.
Nope.
If you tell me you are an AI, I have no idea what business problem you actually solve. Are you an AI that writes marketing copy? Are you an AI that predicts supply chain failures? Are you an AI that drives a forklift?
By leaning entirely on the trend, you abandon the cognitive shorthand in the category. The buyer is left confused. However, when layered correctly, a trend can dramatically accelerate sales. The source text provides a brilliant case study of a startup called Sampler.
Let's look at how Sampler used a trend as an accelerator rather than a crutch.
Sampler operated in the consumer packaged goods space. Their established market category was product sampling. They built software to help massive legacy brands like L'Oreal or Unilever distribute small trial sizes of new products to targeted consumers. They had a clear category and clear value.
But they hit a friction point in the enterprise sales cycle.
Because product sampling, while valuable, isn't usually an urgent board-level priority. It's a tactical marketing line item. Deals were moving slowly. So they looked at the macro environment. What was the massive, terrifying trend keeping corporate executives awake at night at that specific time?
The threat of agile, direct-to-consumer startups. Legacy brands were terrified that companies like Dollar Shave Club or Glossier were bypassing retail stores, building direct relationships with consumers, and hoarding all the data. Direct-to-consumer, or DTC, was the massive trend.
So Sampler layered that trend onto their core positioning. They didn't abandon their category. They still did product sampling, but they repositioned the purpose of that sampling.
Oh, so?
They went to the legacy brands and pitched their platform as a strategic engine to accelerate the brand's own direct-to-consumer initiatives. By using Sampler, the legacy brand could bypass the retailer, interact directly with the end user, and harvest their own zero-party data.
They attached their tactical software to a strategic board-level panic.
Precisely. They linked their core value to a massive corporate trend, and suddenly they weren't a nice-to-have marketing tool anymore. They were an urgent strategic purchase. Sales cycles compressed. Win rates went up.
But the text is very clear on a warning here. The intersection of the trend and the product must be genuine. If a trend doesn't intrinsically reinforce your unique value, it will just muddy the waters and destroy trust.
It creates cognitive dissonance. Enterprise buyers are highly sophisticated. They can immediately spot a superficial trend layer. If your core value is streamlining basic accounting workflows, slapping AI powered onto your website when you were just running basic regression models won't trick the CFO.
No, it won't.
It will just make them question your integrity. As the author wisely notes, it is often far more profitable to be successful and boring rather than fashionable and bewildering. Do not force a trend if it isn't an authentic amplifier of your unique attributes.
Let the category do the heavy lifting. Successful and boring pays payroll. So we've walked through all 6 components: alternative, attributes, value, target market, category, and the optional trend. But I want to circle back to the architecture of the framework itself, because the sequence is what makes it resilient.
The sequence is the entire point. It is an unbreakable chain of deductive logic. If you try to guess at the end, the whole structure collapses.
Let's trace it backward to prove why it's unbreakable. You cannot possibly declare the optimal market category until you know exactly who you are trying to contextualize the product for your target market.
And you cannot identify who cares a lot, your target market, until you have explicitly defined the value you are delivering to them.
And you cannot define that value without translating the provable, objective attributes that generate that value.
And finally, you cannot claim an attribute as unique unless you have a baseline to compare it against the competitive alternative, the status quo.
The logic flows in one direction only. If a team walks into a boardroom on day 1 and says, "We need to position ourselves as the Uber for enterprise compliance," they have started at step 5. They have guessed at a category without defining the alternative, the attributes, or the value. It is strategic malpractice.
It is the equivalent of the Mad Libs template. It might sound compelling in the boardroom, but it will shatter upon contact with the actual market.
We've covered an immense amount of strategic ground today. We've dismantled the traditional way of thinking about product marketing and rebuilt it from the ground up. But it all synthesizes into one core, overriding insight that represents the soul of this methodology.
Yes.
Effective positioning is not an exercise in creative writing. It is not about a copywriter crafting a poetic tagline, and it's certainly not about filling in the blanks of a static document so you can check a box on a launch plan.
Positioning is a logical, sequential chain of deliberate business choices. It requires the courage to start from the stark, unglamorous reality of what your customer would do without you, even if that means acknowledging you're competing against a cold slice of pizza or a broken spreadsheet.
Right.
And it requires the discipline to follow that reality through a rigorous translation process, ending with a deliberately chosen context that makes your product's unique value completely, instantly obvious to the precise cohort of people who need it most.
It is the deliberate engineering of perception. You aren't just hoping the market figures out why you are valuable. You are constructing the exact cognitive pathway they need to walk down to see that value.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave the listener with a scenario to analyze in their own life.
Okay.
Think about the last time you tried to explain your business, a new product feature, or even a complex internal project to someone, and they just didn't get it. You saw their eyes glaze over, or they asked a question that proved they completely missed the point of what you built.
It's an incredibly frustrating feeling. We default to assuming the other person just isn't paying attention or they aren't smart enough to grasp the technical nuance.
But apply the framework we just discussed. Ask yourself, was the problem really their comprehension? Or had you, without realizing it, accidentally invited them to judge your sports car by the strict, heavy standards of a motorcycle?
Wow.
Had you trapped your brilliant idea in the wrong mental category?
That reframes the entire concept of communication. Because once you possess the raw ingredients of positioning, the alternatives, the attributes, the value, the specific audience, and the category, you realize you aren't at the mercy of the market's assumptions.
You're really not.
You have the structural power to change the context. You have the power to pull the tarp off the sports car and make them see it for what it truly is.
You are no longer trapped by the status quo or the legacy of your own code base. You dictate the rules of the game.
And the real magic happens when we take these raw ingredients out of the laboratory and put them into play. Now that we understand the atomic structure of effective positioning, how does a company actually execute this methodology without the executive team killing each other in the process? Next time, we will dive into the exact step-by-step process for extracting these components from the minds of your team, forcing alignment across sales, product, and marketing, and finally making your product obviously awesome to the world. What if the absolute biggest mistake you can make with your product is assuming you actually know what it is?
Oh, that's a terrifying thought.
Right, because here's the core tension we're unpacking today. You built the thing, sure, but you don't define it. The people who obsess over it do.
It's just, it's a brutal realization for anyone who creates anything.
Yeah.
You spend a year, maybe two, just locked in a room. You are obsessing over the blueprints, the code base, the physical design. You pour all this money in your own sweat into realizing this really highly specific vision.
Absolutely.
And then, launch day comes, you put it out into the world, and you suddenly realize the market, the actual human beings with their own messy, unpredictable lives, well, they hold all the cards.
They really do.
They have the final say on what your invention actually is, regardless of what you, wrote on the packaging.
I want to focus on the paralysis that causes, because when you are a founder or, a marketing director tasked with creating a go-to-market strategy, that realization just turns the whole process into a nightmare.
Oh, a total nightmare.
You sit down to figure out how to sell this thing, and everything is just this massive catch-22. Think about the dependencies here. Your market depends on the value you offer.
Right.
And the value you offer depends on your specific features. But your features only really matter depending on the market you target. I've stared at whiteboards trying to map this out, and it feels like an infinite paralyzing loop.
Yeah, you're just drawing arrows in a circle.
Exactly, until your brain hurts.
The human brain hates circular logic. We want a linear path, step one, step two, step three.
Yeah, just tell me what to do first.
But positioning a product, it organically resists that linearity. You are trying to solve an equation where every single variable depends on Well, another unknown variable.
It's impossible.
It is, unless you find a way to anchor one of those variables. Without an anchor, the equation is unsolvable. You just spin in circles, burning cash and runway.
And that is exactly why we are here. In this deep dive, we are dissecting Chapter 4 of April Dunford's Obviously Awesome.
Such a great book.
It really is. And specifically, we're looking at step 1, which is understand the customers who love your product. We are going to look at why trying to position your product around its technical features is, frankly, a lethal trap.
A total trap.
And why reverse engineering your absolute happiest customers is the only path to building a foundation for massive sustainable growth.
Yeah.
So if you are an entrepreneur trying to find product market fit, or a marketer trying to lower your acquisition costs, or really just someone fascinated by why certain businesses explode while others completely fizzle out, this is your blueprint. This is how you cut through the noise and find your exact target audience.
This chapter really is the bedrock.
Right.
If you get this wrong, every subsequent marketing dollar you spend is essentially like being set on fire.
Ouch. But true.
You cannot write website copy, you cannot train a sales team, and you certainly can't scale if you are trapped in that circular logic you just mentioned.
Well, I actually want to dig into that circular dependency trap first, because I have lived this pain, and the book lays it out with terrifying accuracy.
It really does.
When you decide to systematically approach positioning, you just immediately hit a brick wall. Let's pretend we are a startup team right now.
Okay, I like it.
We sit down at the conference table and we say, all right, we need a go-to-market strategy. What is our best market category?
You ask that question, and immediately someone in the room raises their hand and says, well, we can't choose our market categories until we know exactly who our target customers are.
Right.
And what specific value we are delivering to them, which is incredibly annoying, but entirely correct.
Yeah, you can't say you are in the enterprise security category if your target customer is a local bakery and your value is simplifying payroll.
Okay.
So we pivot. We say, okay, smart guy, let's define our value first. What is the core value we deliver? But then the lead engineer chimes in.
Right. The engineer points out that the value you deliver is completely dependent on your unique differentiators, the actual tangible features of the product.
Yeah.
You cannot claim your value is saving thousands of hours of manual data entry if you don't actually possess an automated data scraping feature that works flawlessly.
Yeah.
The value is just a promise, The differentiator is the proof.
So we pivot again. We say, fine, let's list our unique differentiators. Let's list the features. And this is where the loop closes and totally strangles you.
Yep, here it comes.
Because your differentiators depend entirely on the alternatives you're comparing yourself against. You are only faster compared to a specific slower alternative.
Right.
You are only cheaper compared to a specific premium alternative.
And how do you know what alternatives the customer is comparing you to?
By knowing your market category.
Exactly. By knowing your market category. The category dictates the competitors. If you call yourself a CRM, the customer immediately compares you to Salesforce or HubSpot.
Yeah.
If you call yourself an email marketing tool, they compare you to MailChimp. You're right back to the exact question you started with.
It's maddening.
Category dictates competitors. Competitors dictate differentiators. Differentiators dictate value. Value dictates target customer. Target customer dictates category. It's an airtight paradox.
It makes me sweat just talking about it. How on earth do you break that?
Well, you have to stop looking at the whiteboard and start looking at the real world.
Okay, what does that mean practically?
The book shares this really illuminating anecdote about the author having coffee with a friend who was also a veteran VP of marketing. They had both worked at a string of successful startups.
Right.
And they were comparing notes on survival tactics. Specifically, what do you do in the first 30 days at a new, highly impatient startup where the board is demanding immediate results?
I love this part because it cuts through all the theoretical, business school frameworks. Neither of them started by analyzing the product roadmap.
No.
They didn't commission a massive, expensive market research study. They both independently realized that the only way to break the circular dependency loop is to look at what is already working in the wild and then aggressively decipher why.
They looked at the raw data. Which marketing campaigns actually generated qualified leads? Which white papers were being downloaded?
Yeah.
And more importantly, which deals were actually closing? All of that forensic accounting led them to one specific, isolated group of people, the happiest customers.
Okay, I have a massive problem with this. And I think anyone who has ever had a board of breathing down their neck for monthly recurring revenue is going to feel the exact same way.
Let's hear it.
If I am running a startup, isn't all revenue good revenue? I mean, if a moderately happy customer is willing to pay me $10,000 a month, why on earth would I ignore them to focus exclusively on some tiny sliver of ecstatic fans? That feels like startup suicide. You don't turn away cash?
It totally feels counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But let's break down the actual hidden mechanics of a moderately happy customer paying you $10,000.
Okay.
That $10,000 is not pure profit. It comes with massive operational drag. A moderately happy customer is usually someone who is using your product for a use case you didn't really design it for.
Oh, interesting.
They're forcing a square peg into a round hole.
Because they kind of like the UI, or maybe their boss forced them to buy it, but it doesn't quite fit their workflow.
Precisely. So what happens? They submit 50 customer support tickets a month because the software doesn't do exactly what they want.
Oh, wow.
Your support costs skyrocket. Then they start demanding custom features. Hey, we paying you 10 grand a month. You need to build this specific integration for us.
I've seen that happen so many times.
Yeah, your engineering team is distracted from the core roadmap, building bespoke features for one mediocre client.
I see where this is going. It's a huge resource drain.
It is a fatal resource drain. And the worst part, after sucking up all those resources, that moderately happy customer is still going to churn in 9 months when a competitor launches a product that actually is designed for their specific use case.
So they leave anyway.
They leave anyway. Your customer acquisition cost was high, your support costs were high, and their lifetime value was terrible.
That makes total sense. So the ecstatic fan, the best fit customer, is the exact opposite of that nightmare scenario. We're talking about reverse engineering a hit song here.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, you can't just stare at the sheet music and the time signatures and figure out why a song is topping the charts. You have to go to the club, look at the people losing their minds on the dance floor, and figure out why this specific rhythm makes this specific demographic react that way.
Yes. Let's dissect the psychological profile of that person on the dance floor. The book outlines very specific traits of a best fit customer. These aren't just people who log in every day. These are people who understood the product the absolute second they saw it.
The instant understanding metric. That is so rare. Usually a sales rep has to do like a 45-minute slide presentation just to get the prospect to nod their head.
Right, and if you require a 45-minute educational seminar to explain why your product matters, you have the wrong positioning or the wrong customer.
Absolutely.
Instant understanding means your unstated positioning happened to perfectly collide with their immediate bleeding neck pain point. They saw the landing page and thought, finally, someone built this.
And the book points out something even more critical about these superfans. They didn't haggle over the price.
Which is the ultimate signal in business.
Oh, totally.
Think about the psychology of haggling. When do you ask for a discount? You ask for a discount when you view the item as a commodity. I can get this TV at Best Buy or Target, so I'm going to fight for $50 off.
Yeah, it's just a TV.
But if you are stranded in the desert and someone offers you a bottle of water for $100, you don't haggle. The pain is too acute.
You just hand over your wallet.
Exactly. A customer who buys quickly and doesn't ask for a discount is screaming at you. They are saying, the value I'm extracting from this product far exceeds what you're charging me.
It proves you are not a nice-to-have vitamin. You are a painkiller.
Yes, a painkiller.
And then they become your evangelists. They write the 5-star reviews. They act as references for other buyers. They do your marketing for you. So if you're listening to this and you've been running surveys across your entire customer base, or worse, surveying your churned customers to find out why they left, you need to stop today.
The author actually details her own failure with this. She tried surveying all of a company's customers to find patterns for positioning.
And what happened?
The data came back as absolute mud. There were no actionable patterns.
Really? No.
None. Because a customer base is usually a messy, heterogeneous mix of people who bought for totally different, sometimes contradictory reasons.
The moderately happy customers pollute the data pool.
They obscure the signal with noise. But the moment she filtered the spreadsheet to only include the ecstatic, fast-buying, full-price-paying fans, the pattern was blindingly obvious.
What did it look like?
They were all in the same obscure sub-industry, or they all shared the exact same operational bottleneck.
So the mandate is clear. Isolate your raving fans. Find the overlapping characteristics. Do they all use a specific legacy software they hate? Are they all homaging teams of a certain size?
Right.
Once you find that pattern, you point every single sales and marketing weapon you have at finding more companies that look exactly like them. You ignore everyone else.
Which sounds great, if you actually have customers.
Right.
Right.
I have to be honest, this is where the framework feels incredibly daunting for early stage founders.
It really is.
I am putting myself in the shoes of someone who just launched their MVP, their minimum viable product, 2 weeks ago. I don't have ecstatic fans. I have 3 beta testers who are my former coworkers and my mom, and none of them are paying me.
Yep. The classic startup reality.
So if I don't have this magical base of super fans to reverse engineer, how do I find my anchor? I am back to spinning in circles.
It is the most vulnerable stage of a company's life, and it is where founders make the deadliest mistake of all, which is premature optimization.
Premature
And
optimism.
try to force a hyper-specific positioning narrative before the market has given them any actual behavioral data.
The book uses a really vivid analogy for this scenario, the fishing net analogy. I want to spend some time on this because it perfectly illustrates the absolute danger of deciding what your market is before your market decides on you.
It's a great analogy. Let's walk through the mechanics of it.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine you are a startup founder, but instead of software, you have designed a revolutionary new fishing net. You spent 2 years in your garage engineering this thing. You used a specific type of knot, a highly durable proprietary fiber, a unique weighting system.
Lots of R&D.
And throughout that entire development process, you had a very specific, obsessive theory in your head. You told yourself, this net is going to be the ultimate tool for catching grouper.
You are deeply emotionally invested in the idea of the grouper. You read books about grouper, you talked to grouper fishermen, you designed the packaging with a giant picture of a grouper on it. That is your default positioning.
And it is based on nothing but your internal biases, your hopes, and your ego. So, launch day comes. You take your magnificent grouper net out to the deep ocean, you heave it over the side of the boat, let it sink, and you pull it up.
And it is overflowing a massive, heavy haul.
Oh.
But you look inside the net and there is not a single grouper in there. You've pulled up 2 tons of premium, highly valuable tuna.
This is where the psychology of the founder is tested in the most brutal way imaginable.
Oh, absolutely.
Are you capable of looking at that massive haul of tuna and saying, wow, I was completely wrong. I guess I built a tuna net. Or does your ego intervene?
That's the hard part.
Do you look at the tuna, get angry, throw them all back into the ocean, and keep casting the net over and over again, burning fuel and time, desperately trying to catch the grouper you promised your investors you would catch?
That is the terror of the pivot. If I spent $1 million of venture capital money pitching a grouper net to Sequoia Capital, I
No.
can't just casually walk into the next board meeting and say, oops, my bad, we catch tuna now.
Exactly.
I look like I don't know what I'm doing. I look like a failure.
But the alternative is literal bankruptcy. Think about the mechanical implications of stubbornly sticking to your premature positioning. If you take that net to market, and all your branding, your website copy, your sales brochures, and your trade show booths scream, the world's best grouper net, what is the tuna fisherman going to do when he walks past your booth?
He's going to keep walking. He won't even look at it. He assumes it's not for him.
You have alienated the exact demographic that your product naturally serves best, simply because of your own ego and preconceived notions.
So how does a founder actually survive this phase without looking like an unfocused mess? How do you cast a wide net without coming across as a generic, we do everything for everyone company, which we all know also fails?
In those early pre-traction days, you keep your messaging broad enough to capture different types of users, but focused on the mechanism of the value rather than the specific demographic.
A mechanism, okay.
You don't position it as a grouper net. You position it as a high-durability, deep-water net. You cast it into the shallows to see if the small businesses bite. You cast it into the deep water to see if the enterprise companies bite. You cast it into the tech sector, the manufacturing sector, the healthcare sector.
You let the behavioral data, the actual credit card swipes, and the usage metrics reveal the true audience. You are running an experiment, not executing a rigid plan.
And that requires an immense amount of humility.
Yeah.
You have to admit that the market is smarter than you are, which is incredibly difficult because founders fall right into the next major trap we need to discuss, which is the product-first trap.
Oh man, falling in love with your own features. This is the creator's ultimate blind spot.
It really is.
You spend 18 months writing code. You know how elegant the back-end architecture is? You know that your API is 20% faster than the industry standard. So when you finally get a prospect on a Zoom call, all you want to do is screen share and show them your beautiful dashboard.
It is entirely natural. You are proud of your craftsmanship.
Yeah.
But leading with features is a lethal trap because it exposes a massive disconnect in perspective. When you lead with features, you are unconsciously framing your product against the competitors that you care about, not the competitors the customer cares about.
Wait, hold on. That is a really profound distinction, but it feels a bit abstract. The competitors I care about versus the competitors the customer cares about. Can you unpack the mechanics of that disconnect?
Consider the environment of a tech founder in Silicon Valley or Austin or London. They live in a bubble. They read TechCrunch every morning. They track their rival Series A funding rounds. They go to the same pitch competition.
They know everybody in their space.
Exactly. They're acutely, obsessively aware of the 3 other startups trying to solve the exact same niche problem. They know that Startup X has a clunky UI and Startup Y lacks a mobile app.
So when they build their sales pitch, they design it entirely to defeat Startup X and Startup Y. They say, our UI is frictionless. We have a native iOS app.
Exactly. They are fighting a localized war. But now, zoom out and look at the actual target customer. Let's say the target customer is a supply chain manager at a mid-sized logistics firm in Ohio.
Okay, totally different world.
That manager has never read TechCrunch in his life. He has no idea who Startup X or Startup Y are. He doesn't care about your venture capital backing.
So who is he comparing you against?
He is comparing your shiny AI-powered logistics software to the thing he's currently using to survive his workday. And 99 times out of 100, that alternative is Microsoft Excel.
Oh, man. Always Excel.
Always Excel. Or a massive whiteboard with sticky notes. Or an intern named Greg who manually types data from one system into another.
Okay, this brings up an analogy I was thinking about. It's like a highly trained chef opening a new restaurant in a busy neighborhood. This chef might be completely obsessed with perfecting a highly technical, complex, 24-hour sous vide cooking method.
Okay, I follow.
Why? Because he wants to beat his culinary school rival who opened a restaurant across town. He wants a Michelin star. He wants to win arguments on culinary forums.
The chef is competing against other chefs.
Exactly. But the customer who walks in off the street at 12:30 p.m. on a Tuesday during their lunch break, they don't care about the molecular gastronomy of the sous vide method.
No, they're just hungry.
They are looking at their watch. They just want to know, does the food taste good and can I get it faster than the sandwich shop next door? The customer's frame of reference is entirely practical, immediate, and mundane.
And if the chef designs his menu and his window signage all around the technical brilliance of his sous vide water bath, the hungry office worker is going to walk right past thinking, that looks complicated and expensive. I just want a sandwich.
It's the curse of knowledge. We know so much about our domain that we assume our customer shares that context. We assume they see the landscape the way we do.
To cure yourself of this, you have to ask one terrifying question. If my product did not exist, what would this specific customer actually do tomorrow to solve their problem?
And the answer is almost never they would buy my direct competitor.
The answer is usually they would maintain the status quo. They would keep using the messy spreadsheet. They would keep doing it manually.
So the real enemy isn't the rival startup. The real enemy is the status quo. The enemy is inertia.
And overcoming inertia requires a completely different language than overcoming a rival startup. You don't beat Excel by talking about your proprietary algorithm.
Right.
You beat Excel by talking about how many hours of agonizing manual labor you're going to eliminate from their Friday afternoons. You have to anchor your positioning completely in the customer's mundane, everyday reality.
Which feels totally logical. But that leads to a massive contradiction that I think a lot of founders struggle with. If I'm not supposed to talk about my visionary, world-changing, highly technical features, what exactly did I just spend 3 months pitching to investors to raise $5 million? Because they love that stuff.
And here we hit the great divide. You spend months refining a pitch deck for venture capitalists. It is full of massive total addressable market graphs, visionary claims, and complex technical moats.
And it works.
It works brilliantly. You get the check. So the natural instinct is to take that exact same narrative, maybe tweak a few slides, and put it on your website for the customers.
It makes sense. The story was vetted by billionaires. It should work on a supply chain manager in Ohio.
It is a catastrophic error. The book explicitly warns against this. You cannot position your product for customers the same way you position it for investors. They are operating in different realities.
Let's break down the mechanics of those two realities, starting with the investor. What is the psychology of a VC listening to your pitch?
An investor is not buying a software tool to fix a problem they have today. An investor is buying a financial instrument.
Right.
They're buying a lottery ticket on a vision of the future that is 5 to 10 years out. They want to see a massive, expanding market. They want to hear about how your underlying technology is defensible. And above all, they demand to hear the magic word: disruption.
Disruption. The holy grail of Silicon Valley. If you aren't disrupting an industry, you aren't worth funding. Disruption means you are going to utterly destroy the legacy players, steal 90% of the market share, achieve exponential hockey stick growth, and eventually go public at a $10 billion valuation. Disruption equals a massive return on investment.
It is music to an investor's ears. It is a story of extreme risk for extreme reward. But now, cross the divide. Put yourself in the shoes of the customer, the mid-level manager who actually has to authorize the purchase order and implement your software on a Tuesday morning.
To that person, the word disruption is a threat. It sounds terrifying.
It is the stuff of nightmares. Think about what disruption actually means to a middle manager. It means I have to rip out the legacy systems that my team currently knows how to use. I have to spend the next 3 months retraining my entire staff, who will complain bitterly the entire time.
Yeah, they will hate it.
The new system will inevitably have bugs, and my department's productivity will plummet in the short term.
And if this highly disruptive visionary software fails, or if the startup goes bankrupt in 6 months, I am going to get fired for risking the company's operations on an unproven tool.
Exactly. Customers are not buying a vision of the future. They are buying an immediate, tactical solution to a localized headache. They do not care about your 10-year plan to acquire 1,000 more customers just like them.
Yeah.
They care about safety. They want reliability. They want to know that implementing your solution is not going to ruin their weekend.
The investor deck is a story about risk and limitless upside. The customer deck is a story about safety, trust, and immediate incremental value. They're fundamentally incompatible narratives.
This is why you must maintain absolute separation of church and state.
Yeah.
Never let your investor pitch bleed into your sales materials. When a customer lands on your website, they shouldn't read about how you were revolutionizing the paradigm of global logistics.
Right.
They should read, "We automate your invoice processing so your team can go home at 5 p.m.
Pragmatism over vision. Okay, so let's assume we've survived all of this. We separated our pitches, we let go of our ego, and accepted that we catch tuna instead of grouper. We stopped talking about our complex sous vide features. We found our ecstatic fans. The company starts growing. Revenue is climbing.
A good place to be.
But success breeds a new kind of complexity. As you grow, you might start adding new features, maybe acquiring a smaller company or launching a secondary product. And this triggers a massive structural question about branding.
The dilemma of product positioning versus company positioning. Are you selling the tool you made or the factory that makes the tools?
Right. And founders look around and they see Alphabet and Google. They see Meta and Facebook. They see Microsoft with its massive umbrella brand and dozens of individual product brands beneath it, Word, Excel, Azure. And the visionary founder thinks, I need to build that umbrella architecture right now. I need a parent company brand, and then I'll slot my first product underneath it.
It is an understandable aspiration, but the guidance in the text is ruthless on this point. In the early days, if you are a single product company, attempting to build a separate company brand and product brand is a massive, unforced error. Your company name and your product name must be completely synonymous.
The book lists a graveyard of companies that got this wrong, but more importantly, it lists the giants who got it right. Slack, Basecamp, Twilio, Box, Zeppo, WD-40, Crocs, early Salesforce.
Huge names.
These were single product companies that drove hundreds of millions, sometimes billions in revenue before they ever seriously attempted to diversify their brand architecture.
Let's dive into the psychology of why premature umbrella branding is so destructive. It comes down to a concept called cognitive load. Cognitive load is the absolute enemy of a transaction.
Break down the mechanics of cognitive load for a buyer in the modern software market.
Picture the modern buyer. They have 15 tabs open on their browser. Their phone is buzzing with Slack messages. They're evaluating your software alongside 3 others.
They're stressed.
They are exhausted, distracted, and looking for any excuse to click away. Every single new piece of information you force them to process adds friction. That is cognitive load.
So if they land on my pricing page and they see that the company is called OmniCorp, but the product they are trying to buy is called Dataflow Pro.
Their brain stumbles. They have to pause and map the relationship. Wait, am I buying Omnicorp or am I buying Dataflow Pro?
Yeah.
Do I pay Omnicorp? If I need support, do I call Dataflow? Why are there two names? Is Dataflow Pro just a feature of a larger Omnicorp suite that I have to buy first? You are forcing them to learn a complex corporate hierarchy just to buy a single tool.
And a confused mind always says no. The friction is too high, they close the tab. But let me step into the shoes of the visionary founder again and push back on this. Because I know exactly what they are thinking.
I'm ready.
They're saying, you don't understand my roadmap. This first tool is just a beachhead. I have 5 more revolutionary products launching in the next 36 months. If I don't establish the Omnicorp umbrella brand now, it's going to be impossible to introduce the new products later. I'm playing chess, you're telling me to play checkers.
The founder's logic is sound internally, but it ignores the brutal financial reality of the market. The resolution to this is harsh. If your first product fails to gain massive traction, there will be no future products. There will be no 36-month roadmap. You will run out of money.
You don't survive long enough to release product number 2.
Exactly. Your entire existence depends on the revenue generated by product number 1. Therefore, 100% of your marketing energy, your cognitive budget, and your brand equity must be poured into making product number 1 as easy to understand and purchase as humanly possible.
Even multi-product companies usually lead by positioning the single product that generates the lion's share of the revenue.
You build the broader company umbrella, positioning, only when the portfolio genuinely demands it. When you actually have 3 distinct products in the market, all generating significant revenue, and you are trying to cross-sell a customer from one to the other, then you can start telling the broader story of why they should buy into the Omnicorp ecosystem.
Then not a minute before.
Not a minute before. Until you have the revenue to justify the complexity, keep it painfully, brutally simple. If you have one product, your product is your company.
It is an exercise in extreme discipline. You have to kill your own darlings. You have to let go of the grand, ego-driven vision of being the next Steve Jobs unveiling a massive corporate architecture and just focus on selling the hammer in your hand to the person who needs to drive a nail today.
That discipline is the difference between companies that scale and companies that run out of runway while polishing their pitch decks.
We have covered an immense amount of ground here. We started with the sheer panic of the circular dependency trap. We moved to the operational drag of moderately happy customers, the humility required by the fishing net analogy, the dangers of competing against rival startups instead of the status quo, the radical divide between investor and customer psychology, and finally, the cognitive load of premature brand architecture.
It is a dense web of counterintuitive strategies. But if you step back, there is a singular, clarifying philosophy that connects all of these individual tactics.
To me, the soul of this chapter isn't really about marketing tactics at all. It is about a profound shift in perspective. It is the realization that your creation does not belong to you the moment it hits the market.
No, it doesn't.
Your product is not defined by its technical specs, and it is certainly not defined by the brilliant, perfect blueprint you held in your mind when you started building it.
It is defined exclusively by the people who extract the most value from it and the messy real-world context in which they use it. You do not own your positioning. Your best customers own it.
To find your perfect positioning, you have to systematically dismantle your own ego. You have to stop trying to catch grouper when the ocean is handing you a fortune in tuna. You have to stop demanding a Michelin star for your sous vide technique when your customers just want a fast, reliable sandwich.
Exactly.
You have to shut up, observe how your ecstatic fans actually interact with your creation, and let them tell you what you have built.
It is a transition from pushing to pulling. When you are forcing a premature narrative, sales is a grind. You are constantly pushing a boulder uphill, overcoming objections, defending your pricing.
It's exhausting.
But when you finally align your positioning with the reality of your happiest customers, the friction disappears. You stop convincing people they have a problem, and you simply present the exact solution to the people who are already desperate for it.
Growth stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling inevitable.
Which is the ultimate goal of everything we've discussed today.
But, and this is a massive but, identifying that truth in the market is only half the battle. We've established that your raving fans hold the secret to your product's true identity. But once you, the founder or the marketer, finally understand what that identity is, you face a terrifying internal hurdle.
Because getting the market to agree with you is often easier than getting your own company to agree with you.
Exactly. How do you take this newly discovered identity and get your aggressive sales reps, your highly opinionated engineers, your customer success team, and your board of directors to actually agree on it without tearing each other apart? Because everyone in that building has their own biases.
Oh, yeah.
The engineer still thinks it's a technical marvel. The sales rep just wants to say whatever closes the deal. How do you force internal alignment around this new positioning? That is exactly what we're going to unpack in our next deep dive as we explore the chaotic mechanics of forming a bulletproof positioning team.
It's going to be a good one.
Until then, take a hard look at your revenue, stop surveying the people who don't love you, and for the love of God, stop trying to catch grouper in a tuna ocean.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.